hello, I'm here. I think I might have somebody watching, but I'm sure if it's someone who wants to say hello, they'll make their presence felt. Well, I've got a lot done. I've already got a lot done today, actually. It's 10 to 9 in the morning in the UK where I am. I have already been shopping because I hate shopping and I prefer doing it when there's not lots of other customers around. So I think I went into Tesco and did a top-up shop at 6:30 this morning. And since then, I've been reading going through chapter 40, which is now ready to sign off. So today, all being well, in this session, I'm going to sign off chapters 39 and 40 of Empress of the Trees. And that leaves me just with the 3 chapters set after the majority of the human race is wiped out. So as usual, there are ways you can talk to me. So one of them is via this QR code here. All you need to do is scan it. It'll give you a list of all my various social media. One of them is my Discord server. And if you go to the bottom of my Discord server, you will see there is a section called Voice Channels. There is a live one called Twitch Streams Live, which that noise indicates means it's now open, which means you can either message me through the Twitch messaging thing, or you can talk to me live on there as well. The downside of it is if you do talk to me live on there, your voice will be heard on the stream, so please only do that if you want your voice to be heard on the stream. Otherwise, you can send me a message. I've done a test message to make sure it's working properly. It is. That's a lyric from a song. If anybody watching can tell me what that is without cheating, that'd be brilliant. Lost in the high street where the dogs run, roaming suburban boys. Mother's got her hairdo to be done. She says they're too old for toys. Does anybody know what that is? Ha! The next lyrics go, stood by the bus stop with a felt pen in this suburban hell, and in the distance a police car breaks the suburban spell. There you go. So there's a lot of the word suburban in there. I wonder why that might be. The other thing I have to celebrate a little bit is I've been buying some old Lego, some of the old Lego, Space Lego has many ranges, but the key one is the one that ran between 1978 and 1987. I'm trying to collect all of the models in that range. I've got the majority now, actually, and this little, I say beauty, it's horrible, but this little space robot thing arrived the other day. Now, what is annoying is that the vendor sold it as a complete kit, and actually, this little thing that the people sit in, there should be little rockets and controls on there, each of these, and neither of them have got it. So there are 10 pieces missing in total from a vendor that sold it as complete, and I have asked them to send me the missing pieces, and I've not had a response yet. So I have ordered the missing pieces, and they are going to get a fairly bad review, unfortunately. But this is the best bit. Light and sound as part of the quite rare Space Lego light and sound range, and it does this. Yeah, there we go. Danger, 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 danger. I'm such a child. Anyway, yes, I think there were only 3 models in this range, and the batteries they use, you don't really see these anymore. They're those huge ones that you used to find in the smoke alarms. Obviously most smoke alarms now are plugged into the mains, they're built into the house, but when the original ones came out, most people sort of screwed them to the ceiling and had one of those batteries in them. So yes, there's that model, and I have ordered the 10 missing pieces to go with those. I mean, that you can hardly see there's anything missing, but there's actually little bits that stick up, little joysticks for them to hold on to, and a little engine thing to go on the back. And those should arrive in the next few days. I'm so excited. Right, shall I do some writing rather than faffing about with Lego? I'm just going to check my emails to see if any of those pieces are likely to arrive today, because it's possible I will have had an email confirmation that they are. Nope. Oh, one thing I am getting in the post though, which I am quite excited about, and it should arrive, could even arrive during this stream actually. Big Finished, who do audio drama, including a lot of Doctor Who and Doctor Who related stuff. A lot of it, and if it isn't Doctor Who, it's a cult thing. Although they occasionally do their own new stuff as well. But anyway, they have done an audio drama featuring Jodie Whittaker as the 13th Doctor. And her companion Yaz, and it's awful of me, I can't remember the name of the actor who plays Yaz, which is a shame because I think she's gorgeous actually. She's a wonderful character, and apparently just a lovely human being. And I feel bad that I haven't named her now, so I'm actually gonna. Yasmin Khan, played by Mandip Gill. She's absolutely gorgeous. Anyway, the first 13th Doctor audio that Big Finish have produced, which is set in the gap between Graham leaving and Dan joining. So it's just the two of them. It comes out today. It's a series of 12. So they're doing 12 like 1 hour episodes. And the first one was released yesterday. And I've had a notification that it should arrive in the post today. So I will be listening to that today at some point. Basically, as soon as if it arrives during this live stream, it'll be as soon as I finish this live stream. And no update on the missing. Oh, there's something else being delivered today. Okay, that's huge. Okay. But never mind, I'm in. So, right, anyway. That was it, thinking Siri wanted something, but it didn't. Right, let's do some writing. Let's get rid of those error messages. As I've said many times before when I do this, unfortunately, because I'm working from paper, you won't always be able to see, even though I've got the text on the screen, you won't really be able to see it because I'm not going to scroll down it as I read it because I'm reading it from paper. So the only time I will scroll it is if I find something I want to change. So, chapter 39, March of the Skuld. We have to do this now. Ronnie had rushed down from the roof to the dome where everyone had been waiting in breathless anticipation of her words. Some had hoped that they would be granted a last-minute reprieve, but Ronnie's statement had crushed that prospect. She looked across to where Vickers and Sharvar were helping Simulf to put on a bulletproof waistcoat. This was something she had not considered. The vest that had been part of the uniform that men protecting this facility on behalf of Carl Tucker. That's slightly worded badly. Just add the one word, then it makes sense. This is something she should not consider. Wearing the vest had been part of the uniform that the men protecting this facility on behalf of Carl Tucker had been issued with. Somebody must have been given the grim task of removing them from the corpses. Her eyes met those of Vickers, and she gave him an encouraging smile. He nodded back, the steely look never leaving his face. Many of the others were also strapping themselves into protective clothing. There was not a sufficient quantity for one each, but there was enough for more than half of them. In the last half hour, the group practiced what they would do once they departed from the Arboretum. Who would leave, in what order, the formation they would take once out, and the formation they would take once outside. We need to gather in the atrium by the west door, reiterated Ronnie. Soldiers, Arbor troops, and Forest Lodge personnel must leave first. Alpha Site support staff next, with Simulf in the middle. As soon as we are outside, we must quickly form the protective layer around Simulf, surround them so that any shots fired our way hit us and not them. There was silence, and Ronnie thought she could hear somebody whimpering, but she could not afford to acknowledge it. Come on. Follow me. She walked purposefully out of the Arboretum, the funeral march playing inside her head. She did her best to ignore it. Carruthers, Oakley, Merriam, Vickers and Shaw followed her. Sharvar seemed to have taken on the role of leader of the Alpha Site crew, gestured for them to follow. He beckoned to Simulf, who nodded, and also followed him from the room. Ronnie marched across the western door as everyone else trooped into the small antechamber. There was barely enough room for everyone. Although it was a tiny space full of almost 50 people, there was deathly silence. Once the last of the Alpha Site personnel entered, Ronnie looked at Oakley and nodded. Oakley to Matthews. "Are we clear?" he said into his radio. There was a brief pause. "No sign of movement in the trees. No sign of movement in the trees. Clear to hold. Skuld approaching your door." Ronnie frowned and was about to tell Oakley to ask Matthews for clarification when the door burst open and a lone Skuld stepped in. Ronnie slammed the door closed behind it. Simul stepped forward and grasped the creature's arm. They closed their eyes momentarily, then opened them again and looked across to Ronnie. It is as you suspected. All of the soldiers outside are Yokunda. The Skuld cannot kill them, and the army has destroyed our first wave, stated Simulf. "Then we need to disarm them," said Ronnie. "Skuld, anything that the soldiers are carrying must be removed from their hands and destroyed. The soldiers themselves must be restrained and held. We need many, many more Skuld," stated Oakley. "We must assume the army will keep destroying them, at least initially. Their numbers need to be overwhelming." The numbers need to be overwhelming is probably better. Ronnie nodded in agreement and turned to face the wooden creature before her. You must supplement your numbers with as many Skuld as you can, hundreds if need be. However, there must be enough trees left near this complex so that everyone in this room can safely hibernate once we've enabled Simewolf to interface. Create as many Skuld as you can from trees outside that area and tell them to either protect us or restrain the enemy soldiers. Ensure all Skuld know the location of the interface trees so that we can get any wounded to them as a priority once Simewolf is safe. Some will step forward. It will take a while after I've interfaced before the hibernation process can start, but I will make it as rapid as I can. Skuld, you must also protect these people until then. Ronnie looked at Simewolf. The Skuld cannot harm Yakunda. Can we? The Skuld will protect them, stated Simewolf. And if it's specifically me doing the harming, or another Yakunda, or someone I've ordered the Skuld not to harm, they will not harm anybody that they've been ordered not to, stated Simewolf. If you were to hurt a soldier with Skuld present, they should allow it, rather than preventing us, excelled Ronnie. Good. Thank you, Simewolf. Vickers stepped towards her, a worried look on his face. What are you planning? Ronnie glared back at him. The survival of the human race. The words were not meant to sound so angry, but their truculence caused him to take a hurried step back. He nodded. Ronnie returned her attention to the waiting Skuld. Do you understand what I need you to do? The creature inclined its head. Simewolf also nodded. They understand, they said, letting go of the Skuld. In that case, Skuld, do as I say. Now, Ronnie watched with satisfaction as the Skuld... I'm going to have used the word Skuld. I'm going to say creature. Opened the door and disappeared into the woods. Ronnie looked at the people surrounding her, then at Oakley again. Checking with Matthews, she ordered. All clear now, was his brief response. It may take a while for the Skuld to get to us, said Simewolf. I know, replied Ronnie. So maybe we should wait, called Kendra from the back. Ronnie and Vickers shook their heads immediately. We are one organised army assault away from all of this being over. We don't have the luxury of time. She looked at Oakley. Tell Matthews we're coming out. Now. Oak spoke into his radio as Ronnie opened the door and stood in the doorway looking outside into the clearing. If the army was watching, she was an easy target. When no bullets were fired, she dashed outside, immediately followed by Carruthers, Sharvar, Vickers, Marianne, Shaw and Oakley, as well as the remaining Arbor troops. They swiftly formed a line. Ronnie looked up to see Matthews and an Arbor trooper still on the roof, manning machine guns that pointed at the trees. Quickly, the Alphasite personnel formed a second line immediately behind them, Simewolf in the middle. As soon as they were all in place, the Alphasite group circled themselves around Simewolf, and the last group, Ronnie's friends and the troops, the most expendable, formed a tight circle around everyone else. They were all facing the trees with the door behind them. True to her word, Ronnie was at the very front of the formation, facing the forest, the least safe position. Ronnie had ensured that the Alphasite staff had been given the bulletproof clothing. She would be the first one to be injured, even killed, when they were fired upon. Forward, she cried. The large group started to move slowly ahead. They had been instructed to take a slow pace so that the formation did not disintegrate as soon as they were in motion. Remember, if you hear enemy fire, do not run. There was a logic to having the troopers on the outside, as well as being the ones to face the guns first. They could try to keep everyone in place when the firing started. They approached the tree line. So far, so good, Ronnie muttered to herself. She looked around her. To her immediate right was Marianne, and on her left was Carruthers. Oakley and Shaw were next on each side, then Sharvar and Vickers. That's annoying. Let's just stop that. Our target tree is another 20 metres this way, said Ronnie as the group stopped. Remember, walk around any tree in our path and then ensure you maintain your formation on the other side. Her words were interrupted by a single gunshot. Ronnie blinked nervously, but there had been no noises indicating that someone had been hit. Keep going, she yelled. There was a sudden burst of fire from behind them, and this time there were screams of pain. Someone had been shot at the rear of the pack. Vickers navigated from his place at the front around the circumference and pushed the injured person forwards to ensure the circle's integrity. Whoever had been shot was wailing, but they had not fallen. On the roof, Matthews was desperately searching for the source of the shots. There was a burst of machine gun fire, and the group stopped as someone screamed. Nobody's been hurt, shouted Vickers from the back. The gunfire is from somewhere ahead of us. We are not the target. It soon became apparent what the target was. 50 Skuld were marching towards them. Half of them reached the group and formed a defensive line around the outer circle. The others, now that the circle was reinforced, moved towards the gunfire. Keep moving, shouted Ronnie. We must get Simewolf to safety. There was a sound of gunfire again, but this time it was aimed at them. An individual Skuld on the perimeter seemed to be the target. Ronnie could see the bullets bouncing from the thing in front and to the right of her for a few moments before the torso fell apart. The bullets kept coming, and before the remaining Skuld could close their formation, the bullets tore into the person who was standing immediately behind it. It was Marianne. They shrieked and fell forwards, but before they collapsed, the Skuld had closed the formation to account for their missing comrade. The wooden golem immediately in front of Marianne turned and held them upright, walking backwards to keep their place in the line. Ronnie pushed forwards, grabbing Marianne's hand as she did so. "We don't have time to stop," she said, turning to look at her friend. What she saw horrified her. Marianne had taken at least 2 bullets to the stomach, and their white tank top was a mess of freely flowing blood. Ronnie squeezed her hand, then tapped the Skuld that supported them on its shoulder. "Skuld, this injured person is called Marianne, and they are your personal responsibility. Get them away from here and keep them alive near a suitable tree until they can interface." She looked back down at Marianne. "Are you okay?" Marianne had a glazed expression on their face and seemed unwilling or unable to respond. Their eyes briefly met. I'm just going to reword that slightly. Their eyes briefly met Ronnie's. I'm going to put "their eyes briefly met," and as they opened their mouth to try and say something, a trickle of blood fell out, accompanied by a horrible gurgling. They coughed and accidentally spat more blood out, catching Ronnie in the side of her face and neck. The Skuld had been ordered to protect Marianne, lifted them onto their shoulder and dashed away from the main group. There were more in the shadows of the trees, and 2 ran in to fill the gaps Marianne and the Skuld had created. Vickers, meanwhile, had found his way back around to the front of the pack and found a spot between Ronnie and Carruthers. "Where's Marianne?" "Shot in the stomach. I told her Skuld to get into a tree so that the moment Simon's message is accepted we can get her into hibernation." Vickers looked at the blood around Ronnie's neck. "Are you okay?" Ronnie looked at him and then realised why she'd asked. "Marianne's blood," she said. Vickers swallowed. "Will they survive?" Ronnie did not know what to say, but next to her, Carruthers was not so reticent. "Of course she won't," he said as they pushed forwards. "She was shot multiple times in the guts and she's coughing up blood. Probably dead already." Vickers nodded. Ronnie squeezed her eyes closed for a moment, then looked back at Vickers. Nobody corrected Marianne's pronouns. "We can mourn them later. We have another 10 metres to go." There was another ear-splitting burst of gunfire immediately behind them. It was so close that Ronnie saw the flashes from the barrels of the guns, and so violent that the 3 Skuld disintegrated on her immediate left. Carruthers yelled as a stray bullet ripped through the top of his ear. Further along the line, someone was not so lucky. As another Skuld fell apart, the person behind it took a bullet to the head and fell dead to the floor. It was one of the Arbor troops, one whose name Ronnie had not had time to learn. A voice called out from ahead of them, amplified by a loudhailer. "Halt immediately. My name is Captain Hughes, and there are over 60 soldiers surrounding you. If you continue to advance, we will have to take preventative action. I don't want to kill you." "But you will if you have to," shouted Oakley sarcastically. "Exactly right," replied Hughes. There was another sustained burst of gunfire at the Skuld that surrounded them, and 2 more fell apart. Once again, the people standing behind them caught the stray bullets, and 2 more collapsed to the ground. "Halt!" called Ronnie, somewhat unnecessarily, since the company had stopped. "What now?" Oakley whispered across to her frantically. "We capitulate," said Ronnie. She leaned across to whisper to Oakley. "There should be more Skuld with us any moment, enough to overwhelm them utterly." "Very wise," responded Hughes via the loudhailer. "Veronica Arden, you will step forward." Vickers placed a protective hand on Ronnie's shoulder and shook his head. "That's not going to happen," Oakley shouted to the shoulders in front of him. "It isn't a fucking request," yelled Hughes. "She steps out now, or we will kill all of you." Shava had also pushed his way round from the other side of the group. "They're going to kill you anyway, Ambassador." "They're going to kill all of us," corrected Ronnie quietly. If I can just buy us a little more time." "No," Vickers and Shava had spoken simultaneously. Okay, capitulated Ronnie. "I'll try talking to him." I've used capitulate twice, so I'm going to say surrender in the first one. "Surrender," said Ronnie. "Or at least appear to." "They're going to kill all of us," corrected Ronnie quietly. "If I can just buy us a little more time." "No," Vickers and Shava had spoken to him simultaneously. Okay, capitulated Ronnie. "I'll try talking to him." She turned her gaze to the figure with the loudhailer. "Captain Hughes, I'm Veronica Arden, Ambassador to Idrisil, Empress of the Trees, and Protector of Simulf of Ragnarok. I won't be stepping forward. You need to put your weapons down and surrender." There was an incredulous pause. "And why would I do that?" was the eventual response. "Because every tree is a potential Skuld. You are outnumbered." If that were the case, we would be outnumbered, replied Hughes. I've seen a few dozen of your wooden warriors maximum, and apart from the ones surrounding you, they're all matchwood now. There will be a lot more at any moment, shouted Ronnie. Then I'd better not wait, replied Hughes. Beach platoon, fire now. Forwards, yelled Ronnie, mentally preparing for more bullets. It was then that she noticed what looked like a line of cigarette lighter flames hovering at waist height surrounding them. The Skuld on the perimeter continued pushing forwards, dragging the people inside the ring with them. Ronnie glanced around her and saw Simewolf, absolutely terrified, still safely in the centre. Kendra Briley was standing next to them, holding their hand and whispering something to them. In their ear. There was a loud roaring sound and flames appeared out of nowhere from behind. The Skuld in the path of the fire ignited immediately, as did the three people standing behind them. They became drenched in the propellant and burst into flames as quickly as the Skuld, screaming in agony, but not for long. The burning Skuld, meanwhile, ran away from the circle and into the forest. The remaining Skuld closed the gap as the circle pushed forwards. Shaw heard a frantic voice on the radio. It's Matthews, over. Burning Skuld have just rushed into the Arboretum. We're not safe on the roof. What do you want us to do? Over. Shaw looked confused and Oakley grabbed the radio. There are soldiers with... I'm just going to swap that round, actually. Just have... Oakley heard a frantic voice on the radio. It's Matthews, over. Burning Skuld have just rushed into the Arboretum. We're not safe on the roof. What do you want us to do? Over. Oakley looked confused and Shaw grabbed the radio. There are soldiers with flamethrowers about 5 metres into the trees. Take them out. There was a muffled acknowledgement on the radio and then silence. The soldiers ahead of the group had to step back and maintain a minimum distance between themselves and the advancing Skuld to use their flamethrowers safely. Ronnie looked ahead and realised that they were only a few metres from the tree that was their objective. Keep going, she yelled. Unable to use the flamethrowers directly ahead of them, the soldiers at the front of the pack had resorted to guns again, and the excruciatingly loud sound of automatic weapons recommenced. Another Skuld fell apart, but this time the others filled their place before anybody else could be hurt. From behind was another burst of gunfire, but this time it was Matthews firing at the line of soldiers carrying flamethrowers. A bullet hit a propellant tank and an enormous explosion lit up the forest behind them. Terrified, the circle pushed forwards, almost overrunning the soldiers ahead. Before anyone knew what was happening, the large tree was inside their perimeter. Ronnie pushed herself into the group and came face to face with Simewolf. Their complexion was pale and they looked as though they were about to vomit. We're here, yelled Ronnie, grabbing Simewolf by the arm and dragging them forwards. Simewolf allowed themselves to be led until the trunk of the designated tree was before them. Around them, they could hear gunfire and another explosion as Matthew's bullets found another petrol tank. Simewolf looked at Ronnie and grasped her face with a gloved hand. You are insane, they said with wide eyes, but you deserve a chance to live. I hope my argument was persuasive enough, and quick enough, shouted Ronnie above the gunfire and explosions. Our work is done now. My race should survive. But you also wish to save as many of these brave people as possible, said Simewolf. Of course. They put a gloved hand between their arm and body, wrenching the glove off. It fell to the ground, and Simewolf placed their palm on the trunk. Do you know what? I've not explained why they're wearing gloves. Someone was wearing a pair of glasses. That had been Sharvaza. Let's just read the whole paragraph. Ronnie had rushed down from the roof to the the roof to the dome, everyone had been waiting in breathless anticipation of her words. Some had hoped they would be granted last-minute reprieve, but Ronnie's statement had crushed that prospect. She looked across to where Vickers and Charvel were helping Simon to put on a bulletproof waistcoat. This was something she had not considered. Wearing the vest being part of the uniform being protecting the men protecting this facility on behalf of Carl Tucker had been issued with. Some must be given the grim task of removing them from the corpses. Her eyes met those of Vickers, and she gave an encouraging smile. He nodded back, and the steely look never in his face. New paragraph. Males were also stripping themselves of clothing. There was not sufficient, but there was another. Someone was also wearing a pair of gloves. This had been Charvel's idea. Someone could not panic in the entrance of the smaller tree. Along the way, Kendra had been tasked with staying with them at all times to ensure the gloves stayed on until that last moment. There we go. That will make sense. And go back to... But you wish to save as many of these brave people as possible, said Simon. Of course. They put a gloved hand between their arm and body, wrenching the glove off. It fell to the ground and Simon placed their palm on the trunk. It seemed to take forever, but eventually their hand started to sink into the body of the tree. Simon laughed with relief as they were slowly drawn into the belly of the great oak. As their torso started to be swallowed, Simon took a deep breath and said one more thing. Marianne is a huge part of my motivation for helping you. They are unique and special. I hope they survive. And with that, they were fully drawn into the tree. The circle had stopped moving again, but it did not matter now. Ronnie pushed her way back to the front. Carruthers was dripping with blood, but his wound was largely superficial. She turned to Oakley and noticed with horror that he had taken a bullet to the shoulder. His face had gone white, and his breathing was laboured. Time to surrender, he said painfully. Ronnie nodded and shouted, Captain Hughes, we have reconsidered our position. We surrender. Carruthers nodded. They didn't see what happened with Simewolf. There was too much else going on. Oakley took another pained breath. Good, he said. Skuld! Ronnie addressed the nearest creatures with a voice as low as possible. Retreat until your numbers have grown. Then you are to continue with your mission. Destroy all of the weapons carried by the enemy soldiers and take them prisoner. Ensure all of the other Skuld are aware of this. The creature immediately started walking around the inner circle, touching the other Skuld. Once the communication had been completed, they all ran into the woods behind the circle of survivors towards the Arboretum. There were some half-hearted attempts to shoot at them, but most of the remaining soldiers concentrated on imprisoning what was left of the circle. They were a pitiful sight. At least 8 people, mainly from the outer ring, but a few of the Alpha Site personnel too, had been killed. 2 human bodies were burning a few feet behind them, and others had collapsed, having sustained fatal bullet wounds. There were 10 more walking wounded with various gunshot injuries and burns. Just over half of the group had survived unscathed. Unable to help himself, Oakley lowered. Oakley lowered himself to the floor. A soldier screamed at him to get up, to which he responded, Make me, and closed his eyes. Hughes walked up to Ronnie and had tried to glare her down, but she responded with a defiant stare. Not knowing what to say, Hughes gaped at her until, unable to contain himself, he punched her full in the face. Stunned, Ronnie fell to the floor. Vickers launched himself at Hughes, but a rifle butt to the guts caused him to double over and fall on his back. They had help from armed men outside this group, shouted Hughes. Douglas platoon, search for them. Kill them. If they resist, kill them. As some of the soldiers rushed into the forest, Hughes turned around. Carstairs, you and Cypress platoon guard this little lot. If they do anything stupid, anything at all, shoot them. Lieutenant Carstairs stepped forward. Bradbury, how many prisoners do we have? Bradbury looked at the group, many of whom were now sitting. Many of whom? Most of them were crying. 40, sir. Break them into groups of 3, 1 man to look after each trio. If you counted correctly, there'll be 1 group of 4. Kill anyone who misbehaves. Sir. Vickers was on the floor close to Ronnie. He had dropped his gun where it had fallen and it had been taken safely away from him. What next? He asked her. Hopefully the school will disarm this lot. But the flamethrowers are something I hadn't considered, replied Ronnie. Her lip was split and her nose was bleeding. Kendra crawled across to them. She had a large burn mark on one side of her face and some missing hair, but otherwise seemed unscathed. Bradbury kicked her, then pointed to one of his colleagues. Rowlands, these 3 are yours. You know what to do if they try anything. Rowlands looked down at Ronnie, Vickers and Kendra. Sit back to back, he said, pointing his gun towards them, and stop fucking talking. The survivors from the Arboretum were organised into 3 groups. Each person had their hands bound with cable ties behind their backs, and further ties were used to hold the groups together, so they were sitting in trios. Now, I'm just going to... So they were tied in trios facing outwards. Each person had their hands bound with table ties behind their backs, and further ties were used to hold the groups together so they were bound in threes facing outwards. They were in a sizable clearing. Bradbury, Walker and a couple of other soldiers were at the perimeter, guns ready, in addition to the men looking after each group. "What do we do now?" Vickers asked Ronnie quietly. "We wait," she replied. "There will be more Skuld on the way." "And then what?" Ronnie shook her head. "Once they've freed us, we have to get everybody to safety for Tree." Vickers exhaled. "But they have flamethrowers. If they see a single one of us taking refuge in a tree, they will set fire to it." "What makes you say that?" Vickers tried to shrug. "That's what I would do." Kendra piped up. "I'm not sure I even want to get into a tree, knowing that." "Agreed," whispered Ronnie. "I've tasked the Skuld with destroying any weapons they can find, and then restraining the soldiers." "But will they recognise a flamethrower as a weapon?" Vickers hissed. "Good question," said Ronnie carefully. "I don't know, and that's why we have an unpleasant duty once the Skuld have arrived." Vickers nodded slowly. "We will have to kill all of the soldiers ourselves. The Skuld can't." "All of them?" asked Kendra with shock. "Quiet," said Ronnie under her breath, looking up. Their guard, Rowlands, was talking to a colleague and not paying them much attention. She looked back at Kendra, her eyes narrow. "It's us or them," stated Ronnie. "We don't have a choice." Vickers coughed. "No, we don't." He paused. "I hope Marianne is alive." Ronnie tried to twist around to look at him. "I do too. I've not heard any further gunfire, so hopefully they've not been located. They could even be in a tree by now." There was a sudden commotion at the edge of the clearing, and approximately 50 Skuld arrived simultaneously. Rowlands raised a gun, but only had time to fire a couple of shots before one of the creatures grabbed it from him, twisting it until it was a useless lump of metal. The same was happening around the clearing, with one soldier managing to fire a couple of rounds before his weapon was smashed. Skuld grabbed each soldier, standing behind them with arms wrapped around their bodies, hugging them close. They were unable to move. "Skuld," yelled Ronnie, "get a knife from one of the soldiers. You must cut my restraints and free me." A Skuld that was not holding onto a soldier walked quickly over to a knife it had liberated from Bradbury in its hands. It leaned down and made short work of the bonds holding Kendra, Ronnie and Vickers together. "Everyone stay here for the moment," shouted Ronnie as Vickers and Kendra set about freeing the rest of them. "We're safer here until we know what's happened to the other soldiers." "Will the Skuld bring them here?" asked Vickers. Ronnie frowned. "Do you think they should?" Oakley had just been freed and heard the last part of the conversation. He was rubbing his numb wrists, and his face was pale due to the wound on his shoulder. "Yes, we should get all of them here," he said. Ronnie could see that he was trembling with pain. It would be easier to deal with them that way. Shaw joined them. "Deal with them?" Ronnie looked uncomfortably at Oakley and Vickers just as Oakley started to speak. "They can't be allowed to live. If a single soldier survives, they can use a flamethrower to start a fire which could kill an awful lot of our people once they are hibernating." Adrian and I have come to the same conclusion. "You're going to kill them?" Shaw looked unnerved. Vickers shook his head. "I don't see that we have any other choice." Ronnie closed her eyes for a few moments, then marched to the Skuld that was holding Lieutenant Carstairs. "Skuld, bring all of the survivors to this clearing once they have been captured. Also bring any Arboretum survivors here too, apart from Marianne." Her eyes moved from the Skuld to Lieutenant Carstairs. She stepped down in front of him and glared into his eyes. "Hugh suggested that there were more than 60 of you here. Exactly how many more?" "Lieutenant Andrew Carstairs, born 29th of May 1987. Service number 280479226. Ronnie looked confused. "What?" Vickers stepped forward. He considers himself... "Oh, hello, good morning. Sorry, I don't know how long ago you sent that message. I'm deep in this. How are you today?" "Good morning." "Is it morning where you are? You're 2 hours ahead, aren't you? So it is just still morning, I think. Is it 2 hours?" Let me have a look. You're good. Good stuff. Yeah, you're 2 hours ahead of me, yeah. Thought so. Yeah, I'm getting very close to... So basically I want to sign off. Well, I'm working on chapter 39 now. I should sign this and chapter 40 off today. And then I've just got the 3 sort of epilogue chapters to do, which I've already started reading through. So I could finish by the end of... Well, I could finish this draft or this bit of work by the end of the weekend. It probably won't be totally signed off, because what I'll then do is print it using KDP as a book, and I find that I'll pick up on the last few errors by reading it as an actual book. But it's pretty much there. There won't be many adjustments made because of that. Vickers stepped forwards. He considers himself a prisoner of war, he said uncomfortably. "And he thinks that makes him safe?" asked Ronnie. Carstairs frowned. "Doesn't it?" Ronnie shrugged. "No," she stated. "What you were tasked with would have caused the extinction of the human race. Then what are you going to do with us?" Ronnie considered for a moment. It was bad enough that they're going to have to kill all of these men, but to tell them it was about to happen and let them worry, even for a short time, was a step too far. She walked away from Carstairs. Vickers followed. "How many Arbor troops are there left?" she asked. "There were 7 before we vacated the Arboretum. 1 on the roof with Matthews, 6 on the exterior of the circle. I've only seen Sharvar." I think the rest are dead. I suspect you're right, said Ronnie. That leaves 3 of us to take care of the soldiers. Where'd you get 3 from? Ronnie turned to face him directly. I can't ask you to do such an awful thing and just watch. The blood can't all be on your hands. Vickers' face softened slightly. Ronnie, some of the things you've done today have bloody terrified me. But you won't be executing anybody. I'm a trained soldier. I have killed before today. Sharvar knows his stuff too. We can handle it. Ronnie was about to argue when Shaw rushed over to her. You're needed. He pointed to a gap in the trees. Through there. Right, said Ronnie, moving across to the clearing. Skuld was starting to walk in with other soldiers that they'd taken prisoner. She shoved past them to where Shaw had indicated. 2 Skuld were standing there, each with a person in their arms. Oakley was already waiting, his radio in his hands. He put it shakily back in his pocket as Ronnie approached. Marianne is on the verge of death. If we can't get them into a tree now, they're not going to make it. Ronnie nodded uncomfortably and placed a hand on the tree behind her. After a few seconds, she withdrew it, shaking her head. They're not ready for us yet. Vickers had walked up to the Skuld carrying the other figure. He examined it quietly, then turned to Ronnie. It's Matthews. He's dead. Ronnie exhaled slowly. I'm sorry, Adrian. He did a great job, said Vickers quietly. Blowing up the flamethrower gave the distraction we needed to get Simon safely to their tree without anybody seeing. Ronnie shook her head. He wasn't a designated survivor. Once this was all over, he would have slowly suffocated to death. Perhaps it was for the best. She did not realise that Sharvar had followed them into the trees. And what about me? Ronnie turned and looked guiltily at him. I'm not a designated survivor. Once this is all over, I'm going to slowly suffocate to death. I'm sorry. Vickers stepped forwards. Sharvar, there is something you and I need to do in the very near future. Sharvar straightened and nodded. We need to kill the soldiers. Yes, replied Vickers, surprised. How did you know? Sharvar looked into the trees, a distant expression on his face. It's us or them, isn't it? He looked back at Vickers. I will assist you in doing this dreadful thing. I'm strong-minded enough to help, snapped Ronnie, to relieve some of that burden. Vickers pushed her gently backwards towards a tree. No, absolutely not. Their faces were inches apart. You killed Barrera, Baines and O'Neill. Yes, hissed Vickers back, and I can't stop thinking about it. It's the worst thing I've ever had to do. By comparison, this is nothing. Those boys out there, I don't know them. It's not like I knew my unit. Vickers took a deep breath and leaned in closer. How do you feel about killing Sayers? He whispered. I don't know, whispered Ronnie honestly. We've not stopped. I haven't had time to process it. Once we get through this, it will haunt you, like Barrera and the others haunt me. I won't enjoy dealing with the soldiers, but they'll be dead within a few days anyway. It's a mercy. Don't take part, I beg you. As strong as you think you are, it will destroy you. Sharvar had stealthily joined them again. Ronnie did not notice until he spoke. He's right. Ronnie glared at them both. Then the hard expression on her face melted. All right, but I can't let you do it alone. I have to at least be there. Sharvar was about to argue, but Vickers nodded. I'll need you afterwards, he said softly. Ronnie was about to hug him, but her eyes met Sharvar's. Will you be okay? Sharvar shrugged. I'll be dead by tomorrow anyway. A pained groan interrupted them from the direction of the school that was carrying Marianne. Ronnie rushed over and saw that their eyes were open. Ronnie grabbed their hand. Hang in there, sweetheart, she said. Marianne took a deep breath. I'm cold. I can't feel anything below my waist. How much longer? Ronnie touched the tree behind them, then shook her head. I don't know. Simon must be negotiating now. They do understand the urgency. Do you think Simon has failed to convince them? No, said Ronnie. Her voice was full of more certainty than she felt. Simon will convince his faction. It's just going to take some time. Too much time for me, spluttered Marianne, coughing up some more blood. Ronnie squeezed the hand tighter. It won't be. It won't'll be. Got a lovely little typo there. It won't be, she said, leaning down and kissing their forehead. Mackenzie will need you on the other side. She wiped tears from her eyes. And so will I. The mention of Mackenzie's name caused Marianne to smile. Then their eyes closed as they fell back into unconsciousness. Vickers joined Ronnie and put his hand gently on her shoulder. It rested there for a few moments, then she turned. We urgently need to find out how many soldiers there are, she said. Oakley shuffled painfully over. We've located 4 bodies, 1 with a broken neck, 3 burned. Ronnie nodded. Have we got their commanding officer yet? Oakley nodded, pointing. Captain Hughes is in the clearing. Ronnie started walking the way Oakley was gesturing. He won't tell you anything, called Vickers, running to catch up with her. I know, she replied, but I have to try. The glade was full of soldiers held in place by Skuld. Ronnie scanned the area and saw Captain Hughes. She pointed at him, and Vickers nodded. Ronnie, Vickers and Sharvar approached the soldier. How many of you are there? Stated Ronnie. Captain Raymond Hughes. Born 1979. Service number 239-17302. That's lovely, snapped Ronnie, but you're not a prisoner of war. For the human race to survive, you need to tell us how many of you there are. Now! Hughes glared at her angrily. Captain Raymond Hughes, he said testily. 1979. Service number 2391730. He smiled with triumph. Don't you think it's a bit odd that you've been told to kill civilians? Asked Ronnie. Hughes smirked. Not civilians. Terrorists, he said, enunciating each syllable. If you genuinely believe that's what we are, then you know we won't abide by such niceties as the Geneva Convention. Everyone you've ever known is going to die within the next few days, Captain. My job was to ensure the human race was not wiped out entirely. I have succeeded, but now I need to ensure the people with me here survive too. There's nothing I won't do to make that happen. Hughes looked at her uncomfortably, then his eyes swung to Vickers and Sharvar. They narrowed as he recognised the young officer. Private Adrian Vickers. We were briefed about you. I was hoping that when we got here we'd have an inside man. But you've switched sides, I see. You should be shot as a traitor. Vickers looked uncomfortable, but Ronnie spoke. Actually, he was given orders that even if there was a regime change, he should obey his original commands and protect me, especially if given contrary instructions later. He is still obeying his orders. Only 2 of the 6 assigned to me were brave enough to do so, even though they knew it would mean them being branded as traitor. Being branded traitor. I'm just going to... Branded traitor. Branded traitor. Would you have had the balls to go up against your own even if ordered to? Hughes shrugged, but remained silent. This is getting us nowhere, said Vickers. How many men, Captain? I will not answer your questions, deserter. I had a much better night. Hello, by the way, Bow Street Society. Angel Faye 87 is with us too. Had a much better sleep last night. I went to bed not long after 9 o'clock, slept fairly quickly and woke up at about 6, at which point I went and did a top-up shop because I needed it because I didn't have anything for breakfast, and then came back here and as you can see, I'm signing off in the process of signing off chapter 39. Assuming you're... Oh, no, you're working from home. I was going to say, assuming you're about to go to work, but of course, if you're working from home, you don't start for another half hour, do you? So... Vickers blanched visibly, but did not respond. Oliver Shaw walked up to Ronnie. We think this is the majority of the soldiers. There may be a handful more out there, but not many. How many do we have in total? Ronnie asked Shaw. We have the captain here, plus 4 lieutenants and 52 troops. Ronnie could see that Hughes was listening intently, but his facial expressions gave them no clues. So 61 accounted for. Yeah, that's what I assumed. So 61 accounted for if you include the dead. Is that everyone, though? Sharvar looked around him. One way to find out. He walked over to Hughes and pointed a gun to his head. Precisely how many of you are there? Hughes grinned. You won't use that. Sharvar shook his head. Won't I? If I kill you, there are 56 more people I can ask. I guess they're more likely to answer if they see we're serious. He cocked his gun and pointed it at Hughes. Tell me now. There was a silence for a few seconds, then a sudden loud bang as Sharvar pulled the trigger. As soon as he died, the skull holding Hughes let go, and he fell to the floor. There were murmurs of shock amongst the other prisoners, and one cried out, "You fucking murdering bastards!" Sharvar turned and walked over to Rowlands, who had shouted the words. His expression remained defiant. "If nobody tells us what we need to know, you will all be executed," stated Ronnie. "You can't do that," yelled Carstairs. "We can and we will," said Vickers calmly. "How many of you are there?" "Go to hell," said Carstairs moments before Vickers shot him. Sharvar stepped over to Rowlands. What's your name, soldier? Go fuck yourself, was the response. Sharvar shrugged and shot him. There was a stunned look on Rowland's face as he fell to the ground. There was deathly silence in the clearing. "As you can see, we are serious," shouted Ronnie. "If we have to kill all of you, we will, but we'd rather not. 1 number. That's all we need. Then the rest of you can live." She lied. Nobody... Oh, brilliant. Okay. Excellent. I will look forward to hearing it. Yeah. Is this the ambient reading? So you've added special sound effects and bits and pieces as well. Is that right? All right, she said. Bring me the 3 remaining officers. Shaw walked to each school that was restraining a lieutenant and said something to them. The 3 men were brought forward. One of them looked at Ronnie in disgust. "Do you honestly think any of us are going to tell you?" she asked. "No," said Ronnie, "but I think they are more likely to talk without you here." She pointed to the troops behind them, then nodded to Vickers and Sharvar, who once again raised their weapons and fired. Ronnie turned and faced the remaining soldiers. "Well?" There was total silence for a few moments. Then one voice called out, 65. There are 4 platoons of 16 and 1 captain. Suddenly all of the soldiers were talking at once. Most of them were yelling obscenities at the soldier who had given them the information. Ronnie walked over to him. "Your name?" The soldier looked at the floor. "Private Bradbury." "Thank you, Private," she said softly. Shaw tapped her shoulder. We had 57 before you did what you just did, plus 4 confirmed dead beforehand. If that number is correct, there may still be as many as 4 out. Right, I'm just going to reword that slightly. If that number is correct, there are 4 soldiers still out there. Ronnie nodded. Do you think he gave us an accurate number? Shaw grimaced. From the reactions of his comrades, I would say so. Vickers was listening. I agree, he said. Ronnie said, OK then, Vickers, Shavar, let's get this done. She paused, feeling horribly guilty. Skuld, put the first 10 soldiers in a line. What are you going to do? Screamed Bradbury. You said to be allowed to live. He was 5th in the line that Skuld had dragged them into. The soldier immediately to his right spat into his face as he spoke. Vickers and Shavar stood before the line of soldiers. Vickers started on the left, Shavar on the right, shooting each man before moving to the next. In the middle, Bradbury watched in tears as the men to his left and right were gunned down. Spittle still dripping down his reddening face. He yelled, I love you, Dad, as Vickers fired at him. Ronnie's heart was racing, but she allowed no sign of the inner turmoil to show on her face. Skuld, bring the next 10. The Skuld dragged 10 more soldiers forward and forced them into a line before Shavar and Vickers. Some of the younger ones were openly wailing now. Vickers and Shavar glanced at each other and raised their guns. 10 minutes later, they'd all left the clearing. There was no reason to go back. Shavar and Vickers looked weighed down by what they'd done, and and Ronnie kept all emotion from her face. Once away, she ordered the Skuld to search for and restrain the remaining 4 soldiers. She rushed over to the unconscious Marianne, whose pulse was, if that was possible, weaker and more rapid than before. She touched the tree, hopefully, but still nothing happened. Shavar walked up to her. That was beyond horrendous, he said. I need to speak with you privately, now. Vickers looked worried, but Ronnie nodded, and they stepped away from the rest of the group. Standing between an oak and a Scots pine, Shavar could not make eye contact with Ronnie for a few moments. Then he looked up and handed her his gun. I am the only person left that is neither Opus nor Yukunda. I should say nor. I've said or, but nor is better. I am the only person left that is neither Opus nor Yukunda. The only one that cannot survive, he said. I don't want to suffocate, he sniffed. I don't want to die at all, but we can't stop that now. Will you kill me? Can you kill me? Ronnie frowned. Now? Shavar closed his eyes and nodded. Quickly, please. I might still need you. Shavar opened his eyes. What for? He sobbed. There are still 4 soldiers out there. Vickers can handle them. Ronnie looked at his tired face. I wish there was something I could do to save you. I do too, but there's nothing. So please, do this for me. Tears were streaming down his face. Ronnie looked down at the gun in her hands. It seemed like nothing compared to what she'd just made him do. Please, he sobbed. Ronnie closed her eyes for a second, then nodded. Okay, I'm sorry, Shavar. You're a very brave man. She raised the gun and put her other hand on a nearby tree to steady herself. The surface raised around her hand, and she gasped. Thank you. Take care. See you in a bit. Shavar opened his eyes in confusion and looked up to see Ronnie waving a sap-covered hand at him. I will do it for you, I promise, but right now we need to get everyone else to safety. Help me, please, she begged. Shavar barely had time to nod before Ronnie ran back to the main group. She cried out, Can I have everyone's attention? Simorph has delivered their message. The trees are now ready to accept us for hibernation. I want the most severely injured to the closest trees. Skuld will accompany everyone else to the hibernation trees further out. There were sobs of relief from the people around them. Kendra, you're in a lot of pain, said Ronnie. There are 2 host trees close by. You and Marianne have the priority for these. She took a deep breath. Good luck, everyone. I hope to see you all on the other side. Short and Oakley rushed up to her. We want to stay with you for a bit longer, Oakley stated. No, said Ronnie. The last interface will be myself and Vickers. Her tone softened. You're hurt, Gordon. It was the first time she used his first name without sounding sarcastic. You need to get to your tree. She paused. I'm assuming your message got through and you've now been accepted again as Opus? Oakley smiled and raised his hand. Like hers, it was covered by a thin layer of sap. All good, young lady. He turned to Shaw. Get to safety, Oliver. My job is to look after her. He gestured to Ronnie. It seems I'm not quite done yet. I won't go until I know you're safe. Ronnie had made a decision. You will. You've done all you can now, Mr. Shaw. Take your place in the future. Please do as she said, begged Oakley, grasping his arm. You will be one less person for me to worry about. Shaw swallowed. I'll worry about you. I'll worry about you. But not for long, said Oakley with a grin. Apparently the time will go very quickly once you're in hibernation, and I will see you on the other side. Shaw looked at him, then finally nodded. Okay, take care of yourself. See you soon. They embraced. A Skald walked over to Shaw and indicated that he should follow. Since he was unhurt, he knew that his tree might be a couple of miles away and it might take upwards of 40 minutes to get to it. He shook Oakley warmly by the hand again. Don't leave it too long, old friend, he said as he walked away. Carruthers walked over to Ronnie. Someone had managed to put a bandage around his damaged ear and wipe the blood from the side of his face. Apart from the red stains on the top of his shirt, he looked quite healthy. And before you get any funny fucking ideas, I'm not going until the end either. He looked to Vickers and Shavar. Once everyone else is safe. Ronnie relaxed. Okay, thank you. And with that, she rushed over to the school that was carrying Marianne, dragging Kendra by the arm. We're going to get you to safety. Now, she leaned down and grabbed Marianne's wrist. There was still a hint of a pulse. Come on, it's just the other side of these trees. Ronnie watched behind her as each surviving member of the group that had saved the human race was escorted away, hopefully to safety, by a Skald. It was dangerous, there were still soldiers out there, but it was a risk they all had to take. Ronnie, Shavar and Vickers jogged to the next group of trees, the Skald carrying Marianne and Kendra following them closely. Oakley panted as he arrived a few seconds behind them. We have no time, Ronnie said to the Skald. Get them to their trees. There were 2 large oak trees near each other, and the Skald carried their burden to them. Kendra placed a hand on the tree, and the surface raised around it. The Skald gently lowered her feet to the floor and watched impassively as the tree started to absorb her. She screamed, and now this I'm going to change, because of something I've added in the next chapter. I'm just going to change this next bit. Just change who says this line. She screamed and Shavar dashed over to her and grabbed her arm. It's okay. Ronnie's told me about this. Take a deep breath before your torso goes in. She blinked away tears. She blinked the tears away and watched as her arms sank into the trunk. As the chest started to be swallowed, she looked at him. Thank you, she said. Thank Ronnie too. I will, said Shavar. Moments later, Kendra had disappeared, completely absorbed into the tree. It was more complicated with Marianne. Although not quite dead, they were unconscious and unable to do anything for themselves. Their Skald was holding them upright, and Ronnie held their hands in place on the surface until the telltale raising the bark around their fingers told her that the hibernation process had started. Shavar returned from helping Kendra and watched as Marianne's limp form held upright by the Skald started to be drawn slowly into the tree. Once their arms were in up to the elbow, the Skald stepped away. Vickers put his arms around Ronnie's shoulders. I'm going to put that in another chapter. And she sank into him. Thank God for that, he said honestly. He said, I honestly thought we were going to lose them. They watched for a few more moments. Then a shot rang out. Ronnie screamed as Vickers and Oakley dragged her away from where they thought the shot had come from. Ronnie had just seen a bullet smash into Marianne, but the Skald had been holding them upright had leapt between them and the gunman, so that it took the remaining bullets. The weapon switched to automatic fire, and in moments the Skald had disintegrated. Ronnie screamed as a plethora of bullets slammed into Marianne, blood splattering the back of their clothing and skin a few moments before they were fully absorbed. The group crouched hiding behind the oak. There was deathly silence in the forest until a soldier leapt out and pointed a flamethrower at Kendra's tree. He fired, and a large part of the surface burst into flames, the upper branches and leaves quickly catching fire. Before anyone could react, 3 Skald fell on the soldier, forcing him to the ground. In anger, Ronnie grabbed a gun from Shavar and ran over to him. Come back, you silly girl! You don't know how many more of them there are! Shouted Carruthers. Ronnie ignored him and stood before the soldier. He looked up at her with hate in his eyes. Without missing a beat, she shot him in the head. 3 more, she yelled. There's only 3 left now. She looked around her and swore. The tree containing Kendra was burning like a torch. Her thoughts went to Danny and how he had died. He hoped he'd not been aware of what was happening to the tree outside when it burned. If he had, then Kendra was experiencing those same horrors now. The rest of the group came out from their cover. Oakley in particular looked like he was struggling to breathe. Ronnie looked out at the burning oak and could see that, although most of the outer branches were already gone, the fire was struggling to sustain itself. Not enough oxygen, muttered Oakley with a cough. We need to get further away, though. Ronnie was rooted to the spot. Is Marianne going to survive? Carruthers put his arm around her waist. I was critically injured and I survived. Ronnie looked coldly at him. How many bullets did you have? Crothers looked away. 1, I think. Marianne had at least half a dozen. I agree it doesn't look good, admitted Crothers, but if they'd died on the way in, the tree would have rejected them. I don't know if the damage is repairable, but the trees will do their best. Marianne has more chance where they are than in a hospital. We need to step away and get to our trees. Come, now. We need to step away and get to our trees. Now, come on. Ronnie shook her head. No, not until we've dealt with the remaining soldiers. Look at what they've done. She pointed to the smouldering ruins of the tree that contained Kendra. That could be any of us. Once they know what we're doing, they could observe us and wait until we're all inside before they start more fires. Crothers looked thoughtful. Aye, they could, he finally agreed. So we can't risk all of us going in yet. Oakley was having a coughing fit, but he was listening intently. She's right, he said. Vickers chimed in. It's getting hard to breathe, though. We won't last many more hours at this rate. Crothers nodded. Come back with me to the Arboretum. I came here via Inverness and Aberdeen. I think I have something in my car that might give us an edge. He started retracing their steps, and the others followed him back the way they'd come. There was smoke coming from the Arboretum complex when they arrived. Ronnie looked worried, but Crothers explained. Any school on fire rushed down to the basement, so the fire didn't spread. He walked through the west door, which was wide open. My car is on the opposite side. A skull stepped out in front of Ronnie, making a jump. It raised its hand to where its heart would be if it were human, then splayed its fingers out. Ronnie exhaled. What does that mean? Asked Vickers. Everyone got to their tree safely, replied Ronnie with a smile of relief, then a cough. So we're the last ones, said Oakley quietly. People will be alive in the cities, replied Ronnie, and there are 3 soldiers out there looking for us. So Tucker could send more soldiers, with respirators, observed Oakley. A chill ran down Ronnie's spine, but she shook her head. There's only so much we can do, she said softly as Crothers gestured them to follow him to his car. She paused. I'm only guessing, but I can't imagine it was easy to find that many Yukunda in the ranks of the army. Reinforcements will be regular people. The Skuld can deal with them. All 5 of them stepped carefully through the west door. Sharva hurried up to Crothers and grabbed him by the arm. What have you got for us? He asked. You'll see. The corridor around them was uncomfortably smoky as they walked briskly through and out to the other side. Parked in the car park was a modern racing green Mini Cooper. Crothers seemed pleased that it was still there and walked over to the boot, keys in hand. He opened the door and pulled out a green bottle. Nicked from a 787 that was parked up at Aberdeen Airport ready to be dismantled. Therapeutic oxygen bottle. Can deliver oxygen in pulses as you breathe, so we can make each one last up to 36 hours. That's good, said Oakley, panting as he did so. Really good. How many did you get? 9, replied Crothers with a grin. Ronnie looked around the small group. That's 1 each once things get tough, she said, with a few to spare. Well done, Mr. Crothers. Of course, if Mr. Oakley here would take a hint and bloody hibernate, that would be 2 each, said Crothers. You can't help us now, Gordon. You need to protect yourself. Oakley nodded. I'll have 1. Once that runs out, then whatever happens, I'll go to my tree. I promise. That will leave 2 each for the rest of you. Yes, replied Ronnie. That gives us up to 3 days to make sure the remaining soldiers can't set fire to anything. She scanned the group. Crothers, Oakley, Vickers, and her eyes finally came to rest on Sharva. What about you, Sharva? I'm fine, he said. As long as you keep your promise when we're through. I will, replied Ronnie without hesitation. The others looked comfortably at her. They had not heard the conversation, but it was easy enough to guess what he had asked. She looked around the group. Then her eyes settled on Vickers. So, Adrian, what should we do now? Right, so I've reduced the horrors and the survivors to basically this core group. So let's export to a Word file. I might pop another coffee on in a moment actually before I do the next chapter. Let's get this one put through Grammarly first though. Right, so I'm just going to go and pop the kettle on, and then I'll do this. Oops. That's perfect. I've got exactly enough coffee ground for the for that. And then I shall grind some more for my breakfast tomorrow. Right, let's have a look. So, some would hope they would be granted a last-minute reprieve, but Ronnie's statement had crushed that prospect. Scold approaching your door. That's the kettle boiled. Loudspeaker, no, it's a loud hailer. I'm just going to check the spelling of that, but I'm going to start my coffee first. Oh, where's the mug? Oh, I've already taken it. Warming the mug. Right then, let's just check the word loud hailer. It's a British term for yep, I know. Right, so I'm going to dismiss that. Say more than rather than over. Nope, I'm happy with what I've said there. Going to press my button again on the coffee machine. Oh. Right, hang on. I'm a bit of a sad character. You've probably picked up on that if you watch this regularly. But I collect. I allow myself. I quite like the mugs that Starbucks do, the country mugs, and so I've got a Starbucks. I think they're called Bean There or something like that range. And I allow myself to collect one for each country. I chose country because I figured if I had to go to each city or each state, I would have so many to collect. There'd be 50 plus American. I haven't been to all 50 American states, but I'd probably have 20 mugs just representing the US. The only exception to the rule, where I haven't got a country, is this one. And this is kind of my de facto USA mug, because they don't actually do a USA mug. They do the states, individual states, they don't do a USA mug. So this is my USA mug, and it's Pike Place. And it's actually a mug that you can only buy in the very first Starbucks at Pike Place in Seattle, Washington. So that takes place of America because there isn't a USA mug. Right then. It's mainly commas. There we go. What score is it giving that? 98, that's ridiculous. It's not that good. So download. There we go. So I believe that is chapter 39 almost signed off. Let me copy the text, the edited text, back into the final document. If it'll open, I'm sure it will. Right, so there we go. That's chapter 39 signed off. Woohoo! So let me just drag it into the correct folder. So I've only got 4 chapters left to edit, and in fact, hopefully I'm going to sign one of those off now as well. So let me just drag, don't need those anymore, so they can go into the waste. And let's, now this chapter, I struggled to know what to call it. So I colloquially, I used to refer to this as the chapter of death, because obviously I'm trying to paint that the world is ending, and I can't show the world ending. I can't show everybody dying, but what I can do is have scenes with some of the secondary and tertiary characters that have appeared throughout the book, showing how they die to illustrate the point. And I originally called this chapter The Wings of Angels, and I decided that was far too gloopy, syrupy. So I think, I'm just going to Google the term, but I've called it now Dance Macabre. I only made that decision today. I just want to check what that does mean, what I think it means, Dance Macabre. In its artistic form, it's a medieval allegory depicting death's universality and in its artistic form, it's a medieval allegory depicting death's universality and inevitability, often represented by dancing skeletons leading people of all social classes to their graves. Perfect. That is absolutely perfect for what I need to do for this chapter. So, and it is literally that. So this is Dance Macabre. It's not sexually graphic, but there are a few moments where some things are alluded to. I don't really like describing sex, but yes. Anyway, chapter 40, Dance Macabre. George and Annie Metcalfe's car pulled into the empty car park just south of the main road at the eastern edge of Sherwood Forest. In the 2 days since the general election, they had observed most of the societal structures they'd been accustomed to for their entire lives falling apart before them. Shops were ransacked. Petrol stations were set alight. Murder was commonplace, and the police were hiding. Since entering witness protection, the Metcalfes had been given a new home and new identities. They'd been forced to leave the name Keane behind them. Their protection officer had wanted them to change their first names too, but they had flatly refused. 2 days ago, they received a telephone call from... They had received a telephone call from acting Prime Minister Derek Cockle-Wright, saying that Carl Tucker would almost certainly try to locate them. Once Tucker had visited the Queen, he would have the ability, if not technically the authority, to find out where they lived and what their new names were. Cockle-Wright said many other things in that call, but in short, he'd instructed them to vanish. Over the next few hours, it became apparent that some very strange things were happening. News reports said that oxygen levels were falling dramatically, and this had the potential to be an extinction event not just for the human race, but for every animal on the planet. Areas with a higher concentration of trees were deemed to be the least safe, with oxygen levels there falling the most rapidly. Later that day, stories that seemed to confirm the end of the world started appearing everywhere. Local, national, social and mainstream media. Shops were ransacked. Shop staff were murdered, attempting to prevent theft. Television networks that had just resumed their regular service earlier that morning had gone dark within hours, but this time it was because the people pressing the buttons in the various control rooms had gone home, electing to die with their families. George parked, pulled on the handbrake and turned the car off. He stepped out, leaving the keys in the ignition. He would not be needing them again. Annie climbed out of the passenger seat and opened the boot. George joined her as she collected 2 carrier bags full of provisions they'd brought with them, as well as a sports kit bag. He slammed the hatch down and took the carrier bags from Annie as they headed into the forest hand in hand. They came to a clearing that Annie immediately recognised from years before when they had attended a forest church among these very trees. She stopped for a moment short of breath. George waited for her, taking the kit bag from her hands. "Yes," he said softly, "it is getting hard to breathe. Are you sure this is what you want, love?" Anne exhaled slowly, then took another lungful of air. She nodded. "If we're going to die anyway, I'd rather do it here. It's the closest to Ronnie that we can be." I'm going to just change that slightly. It's closest to Ronnie that we are going to get. There we go. George nodded, retook a hand, and then carefully continued walking through the trees. After a short time they came to Ursula's cottage. It looked cold and deserted, but George insisted on knocking at the front door anyway. It was not until they were sure nobody was home. And let's just reword it. It's not until they were sure nobody was home that he used his shoulder to smash his way in. They walked through the house carefully, checking that Ursula was not there. There was an unlit fire in the hearth and none of the lights worked. When George checked, it became apparent the electricity had been disconnected. After leaving the shopping bags in the kitchen, George and Annie left the cottage, closing the door behind them, trying to make sure that it was not too obvious from the outside that it had been broken into. They continued into the forest, their destination a very specific yew tree. They came to the last corner of the path before it snaked to the tree, walking slowly now because breathing was becoming uncomfortable. The sight before them made Annie turn away, her eyes brimming with tears. She hugged her husband. The tree they had wanted to visit had been burned and chopped down. George could not tell in which order, but after a few minutes he gently disengaged from his wife and walked forwards. Crouching down, he touched the bark, tears in his eyes. "People are such bastards," he said to himself. Annie took his hand and pulled him up. "Come on, let's get away from here." Together they walked away from the ravaged tree and back towards the cottage. They sat in silence on Ursula's small sofa. They had eaten a meagre meal of cold beans and bread from their provisions. Annie had earlier noticed Ursula's writing desk in the corner and had found some writing paper, and between them they had composed a letter to their daughter that they knew she would never see. They left the front of the writing desk open, and on it they placed the contents of the sports bag, Ronnie's pencil case, and the notebooks containing her pencil drawings. Not all of them, but as many as they'd been able to retrieve from both home and Mendell House after she had vanished. On top of the notebooks, they placed the letter in an envelope with "To our beautiful daughter Ronnie" written on it in George's perfect handwriting. "What do you think she's doing now?" asked Annie. She leaned into George. He smiled and drew her in closer. "I don't know, but my guess is she will have been trying to stop all of this from happening." He kissed Annie tenderly, tears falling down his cheeks. "Are you sure about staying here? It's getting really hard to breathe." "Do what?" asked Annie tearfully. "Go back to town and live for maybe a couple more days. Watch the people around us die or destroy themselves." George nodded and then stood up and lit the fire. The flames seemed to take longer to get going than usual, and even when they were roaring, did not seem to offer much warmth. George and Annie cuddled on the sofa. As the evening wore on, the cuddle evolved into embrace as passionate as their first times together as teenagers, if somewhat more gentle. When they finished, they lay on the sofa, curled up around each other, enjoying others' warmth as they fell asleep for the final time. So that's Ronnie's parents dead. That's cheerful, isn't it? Adrian Vickers quietly crept quietly. Boldly went boldly. To boldly go. Yeah. I've split me infinitive. Adrian could quietly through the forest, 2 paces ahead of Vishal Sharvar. It was almost 24 hours since everyone else had hibernated. The pair were the only people left with any understanding of military tactics, but there were also Carruthers, Oakley and Ronnie to consider, civilians that had to be kept alive. There had been no sign of 3 remaining soldiers, no gunfire, no flames, nothing. It was entirely possible they had died or decided that there were not enough of them and retreated. The number of schools that protected the forest had been scaled back drastically in the last few hours, but there were still a few of them wandering about, ready to report back if they encountered anything unusual. Sharvar and Vickers were following up on one of these reports now. Both men were wearing their stolen oxygen bottles. Because they were moving quickly, they had the oxygen flow switched on. Vickers stopped and Sharvar came to halt behind him. He was sure that they were near to the area the school had told them about. It was supposed to make itself known to them when they got close. Just popping my battery case back on properly. Hang on. There we go. Vickers pulled the radio from his belt. Vickers to Oakley. I think we're almost here, but there's no sign of our Skuld friend. Over. Both himself and Sharvar had their weapons raised as they looked warily around the trees. The radio crackled into life. Oakley to Vickers. Ronnie is letting them know you are ready for your escort. Over. Thanks, replied Vickers. He looked carefully around him again, but apart from the occasional branch swaying in the wind, there was no movement to see and no unusual sounds to hear. A moment later, a large tree that was just out of their sight disgorged a Skuld. Vickers could hear the footsteps as it walked quietly towards them. Sharvar glared at the Skuld as it approached. As soon as it knew that Vickers and Sharvar had seen it, it gestured them to follow and moved back into the trees. Our escort has arrived, over, said Vickers, following the Skuld and returning the radio to his belt. He heard Oakley acknowledge his words. They soon came to a small clearing. In the corner was something unusual. Vickers frowned, motioning for Sharvar to halt. It looked like an ammunition box, possibly more than one. An attempt had been made to cover it with loose ferns and other items that littered the forest floor. His eyes narrowed. It could be a trap, he said softly. Don't get any closer. Dropping his back to the floor, Vickers pulled a pair of field glasses from it and used them to examine the object that was perhaps 3 metres from them. As he did so, he handed the radio to Sharvar. Report in, he ordered. Sharvar raised the radio to his lips, his eyes never leaving the object on the ground. Sharvar to Oakley. We've identified what looks like an ammo box that someone has tried to conceal. We're not getting any closer in case it's booby-trapped. Vickers looked at the ground around the case, attempting to locate any motion sensors or tripwires, but could see nothing. There was a layer of pine needles on the ground. Many of the trees had started to shed their foliage again, so it was conceivable that something was hidden. However, the needles looked evenly distributed. Nothing you could see made the ground look as though it had been smoothed over to hide anything. Be very careful, over, came Ronnie's voice from the radio. Vickers grinned, despite himself. I can't see anything to suggest it's a trap, he said to Sharvar, putting the field glasses down. Could we get the Skuld to approach it? Asked Sharvar. Makes sense. Check with Ronnie, replied Vickers. He stepped carefully into the centre of the clearing and started using the field glasses again to survey the trees around him. Can we use the Skuld to try and move the object? Over, asked Sharvar into the radio. There was a brief pause before Ronnie's voice came back. I'm going to lose it into the radio because I've repeated the word radio. So if I do that, then that loses the repetition. Can we use the Skuld to try and remove the object? Over, asked Sharvar. There was a brief pause before Ronnie's voice came back over the radio. Yes, but get out of the way. We can afford to lose a Skuld, but not either of you. Vickers smiled grimly and continued to use the glasses to look around him. Sharvar joined him, then tapped him on the shoulder. What's that, do you think? Vickers lowered the glasses and looked to where Sharvar was pointing. There was some scuff marks about 3 feet up the trunk of the tree. Silently, he pointed to the tree on the opposite side of the small clearing. There are more over there, he said. We should step away, said Sharvar urgently. Don't move your feet until I tell you to, said Vickers carefully. He put the glasses to his eyes again and used them to inspect the tree opposite him with the scratched bark. He raised the glasses carefully up the trunk until he noticed something small and black poking out from between the sparse pine needles, just over 10 feet from the ground. He lowered the glasses. We need to walk away, carefully. What do you see? Hissed Sharvar. Motion sensor? Vickers shook his head. Camera. We need to get out of here. The pair barely had time to turn before the half-concealed ammunition box exploded in a large ball of flame. The distant boom echoed around the forest. Carruthers, Oakley and Ronnie were sitting close to the Arboretum complex on chairs purloined from one of the laboratories. Ronnie frowned and looked to Oakley. He shook his head and shakily raised the radio to his lips. Oakley to Vickers and Sharvar. What's happened? Is everything all right? There was silence over the radio. Oakley to Vickers. Can you hear me? The sound of a single gunshot echoed through the trees and Ronnie jumped to her feet. It was followed a few seconds later by what sounded like an exchange of gunfire. Ronnie dashed to the nearest large tree, surprised by how out of breath she was when she reached it, and put her palm to it. A moment later, a Skuld emerged from the bark. Mobilise as many Skuld as you can. Find out what happened. Skuld nodded and rushed into the trees. Oakley turned to Oakley and Carruthers. We need to get out there. It could be a ruse, stated Carruthers. Very likely the remaining soldiers planted something in the trees knowing we would check it out, agreed Oakley. Ronnie shook her head, tears of anger forming in her eyes. We should never have sent them out. Carruthers stood and tried to place a placatory hand on his shoulder. We had no other choice. What we just heard sounded like an exchange of gunfire. People firing at each other. Hopefully Vickers and Sharvar are okay. Ronnie grabbed the radio, pressed the button and shouted into the microphone. Will somebody please answer me? There was a crackle and a voice responded. This is Private Walker. Your friends are dead and now are coming for you. Carruthers grabbed the radio from his hands, pulled out the battery and threw the unit into the bushes. We need to get out of here, he said, to the safety of our trees. We can't just leave Adrian and Sharvar out there, cried Ronnie angrily. They're dead. Carruthers shouted back at her. "We don't know that," Ronnie spat angrily at them. "And I need to know. You two hibernate if you must." Oakley stood up carefully and walked over to her. He grabbed her hand and looked into her eyes. "I'm going to have to go soon, but until I do, I stay with you. If you're going to find out what happened, I have to come with you." "And so do I," said Carruthers angrily. "But you're going to bloody get us killed, you do know that." "We don't matter," stated Ronnie angrily before moving into the forest the way Vickers and Sharvar had gone. "I bloody do," muttered Carruthers to himself and followed. Oakley used the dial to turn up the flow rate on his oxygen and followed. Derek Cockerell Wright sat at the head of the table next to his wife Stephanie in the dining room of his Grade 2 listed manor house in West Sussex. Around him were as many of his family as he'd been able to gather, which was most of them apart from which was all of them, not most of them. Which was all of them, apart from his second eldest son George, who lived in Melbourne with his family. There were no flights now. Perhaps he should have used his government influence to fetch them before he'd ceased to be Prime Minister. It was only the day before yesterday. That was only the day before yesterday. That had been. That had happened the day before yesterday, but it seemed like a lifetime ago. His other 3 children and their spouses were with him around the table. All of their progeny were there too, 8 grandchildren ranging from the ages of 4 to 16. In addition, Cockerell Wright's brother and his wife plus their child were present. A total of 19 people were feasting in his grand dining hall. The table was covered with the most gargantuan spread any of his family had seen in years. There were several meat joints on trays, most of which had been picked clean, as well as roasted vegetables, salads, cold meats, homemade potato salads, coleslaws and dips. There were several desserts to choose from and a huge cheese board at the far end with a selection of bread and biscuits next to it. The food was spread across the whole table in copious volumes, and there was still lots left. On a unit at the side were over 20 bottles of red wine. The whites were in a fridge that had been dragged from one of the staff quarters and dumped there. Open bottles littered the table as well as glasses that were full of fine vintages. Cockerell Wright had sent his staff home as soon as the food came out. His lovely cook, Mrs. Phillips, had argued that this would leave nobody to clear up and do the dishes, but Cockerell Wright reminded her there were 19 people present and between them they ought to be able to muddle through. Mrs. Phillips had cried when she left. It was as though she knew. Her grandfather was not meant to have favourites, Cockerell Wright reflected to himself, but his youngest grandchild, Emily, currently sitting on his knee, was definitely his. She was not the daughter of his youngest son. She was an unexpected addition to the family of Alexander, his eldest. "And are you going to do all the washing up, Grandad?" she asked him. "Dear me, no," he replied, smiling down at her blue eyes and blonde curls. "Mrs. Phillips will be coming back to do them." Emily frowned. "Mrs. Phillips said she wasn't coming back," she said earnestly. "She meant today, Emily," said her father, who was seated to his father's left. "She wasn't coming back today." "No, I don't think she was coming back tomorrow either," stated Emily firmly. "She was crying." Alexander smiled at his daughter and pushed another bowl of ice cream in front of her. He looked at the contents of the table and put his arm around his wife's shoulders. You said there's a word there that doesn't need to be there. "You said the bedrooms were made up, Father?" he asked. "Indeed," said Cockerell Wright, smiling down at Emily and then returning his gaze to his son. "Mr. Hale left instructions as to which suite was set up for whom." He pulled up an envelope from his pocket and opened it. "You and Angela are in the Caldwell suite with Emily." Angela frowned. "Alex, I want to be in Blakely. It's much better for keeping on R&Ms. Caldwell just isn't suitable." Cockerell Wright smiled, fighting the inner voice that was shouting that none of them would make it as far as the bedrooms anyway. "We should retire to the Red Room first," he said without a smile. "I think after this enormous repast we will all want to rest our eyes before ascertaining who is sleeping where." "That's a good shout, Father," replied Alexander, standing up. "Come on, Angela," he said, holding his hand out to his wife. "I'm sure that we all need a post-prandial snooze. Look, even Emily's yawning. Come with Mummy and Daddy, darling." Emily smiled, hugged her grandfather and then stood up. I've got her smiling again in 3 words' time. Emily hugged her grandfather and then stood up. She smiled and promptly fell over with a giggle, her head missing the edge of the table by inches. Slightly armed, Cockerell Wright stood. "Come on, everyone. Let us all retire swiftly to the Red Room. Take full glasses with you." Everyone filled their chalices and stepped across the hall to the large room opposite. It was lined with ancient sofas, chairs and antiques. There was a large and expensive crystal chandelier hanging from one of the beams that crisscrossed the high ceiling. I haven't put high, but I'm going to add that. which Stephanie activated using a proportionally tiny light switch. "Sit, everyone," cried Cocklewright, urging everyone to their seats. Alexander was carrying Emily, who was already fast asleep. He walked up to his son and reached out. "Let me take her." Alexander smiled and handed his daughter to her grandfather. Stephanie met Cocklewright's gaze as they sat down in his favourite settee. Stephanie had her arms around him, and Emily. Hang on, that was... Stephanie had her arm. Embraced. She embraced him as Emily rested in his arms. "Is she?" whispered Stephanie into her husband's ear. "I'm afraid so," said Cocklewright, kissing Emily's forehead, with tears in his eyes as he did so. He watched the rest of his family find space to sit, all of them yawning and showing signs of sleepiness. He returned his gaze to the body of his beautiful granddaughter, who was resting peacefully in his arms, and felt sleep overtaking him too. He leaned across and kissed his wife as his eyes closed. He hoped that he'd got the dosage right. As awful as this was, the real horror would be if any of them woke up. So that's the Prime Minister gone. So I've shown Ronnie's parents and the Prime Minister. I think I've got one more of these scenes, I think, showing, and I was going to show because that's the ex-Prime Minister. He's not been Prime Minister for 2 days. I kind of wanted to show the new Prime Minister, my main bad guy, dying, but I felt it was one too many, and I didn't want to take any of the ones that I've put in out. Ronnie burst into the clearing. Carruthers was not far behind her, and Oakley was doing his best to keep up. There were signs of an explosion, but she could not see any bodies. Moments later, Vickers stumbled into the clearing. Half of his face was a bloody mess, and the corresponding side of his body was bleeding heavily through his clothes. Ronnie rushed over to him, but he pushed her away. "It was a trap. There were 3 here. I killed 2. He sank onto his knees as Carruthers and Ronnie raised their weapons just in case. Oakley joined them a moment later, his breathing hoarse. "What the hell happened?" "A bomb," coughed Vickers. "Shavar is dead. He followed me out, but he was horrendously injured. He fell over through there and I was unable to revive him." He closed his eyes. "I've been shot." He fell to his knees, wincing in agony, as Ronnie rushed over to him. "Adrian, are you okay?" Vickers coughed painfully. "No," he said weakly. "I didn't get the last one. I'm sorry." He slumped, his eyes closed. Ronnie nodded and grabbed his hand. "Carruthers, help me get him over my shoulder." "His 3 is half a bloody mile away," spat Carruthers. "It will take you 10 minutes at the very least." "I can't let him die," said Ronnie angrily. Carruthers grabbed her arm and pulled her away from Vickers. "It'll be him or you. Don't be stupid, girl. The pair of you will be an easy target." Ronnie shoved Carruthers away and ran back to Vickers. She grabbed his arm and tried to pull him to his feet, but he was too heavy. Shaking his head, Carruthers helped her. Once he was standing, Carruthers steadied him as Ronnie leaned down and lifted him onto her shoulder. She turned back to Carruthers. "We both live or we both die. You get Oakley to his tree. He's your responsibility now." She stepped towards the edge of the clearing, steadying herself as she got used to his weight. "We have to split up." Oakley shuffled uncomfortably up to her. "No," he said. "We live together or we die together. I'm staying with you. Mr. Carruthers?" Carruthers yelled at them and then glared at them and then yelled, "For fuck's sake!" at the top of his voice before he sarcastically gestured for Ronnie to lead the way. Oh, that is so obviously Peter Capaldi, isn't it? Peter Capaldi in Malcolm Tucker mode. And this is the last. This is quite unpleasant. Oh no, there's 2 more death scenes. Not just one, there's 2 more. I've forgotten about this one. Yeah, so I couldn't add another. He's arriving now. Lord Farnborough's driver, Mr. Woods, placed the phone call into the cradle on the desk in Farnborough's study. The room was as you would expect if you knew the man, a veneer of wealth corrupted by filth. Ancient and valuable volumes filled the immense bookshelves behind his desk, but the I don't like ancient and. Let's just change that. Valuable old volumes filled the immense bookshelves behind his desk, but the spines were faded and covered with grime. The original paintings on the wall had gilt-edged frames that were thick with dust. The desk itself contained at least 2 overflowing ashtrays, as well as a pair of teacups that had been adopted for the same purpose. Have I got anybody with me, by the way? So hard to tell. I can't remember which bit of my app tells me. Hang on. Oh, 4 viewers. Hello. Right. Woods looked at a message that popped up on his phone. The last of the staff have left, my lord. Farnborough took another drag from his cigar and nodded. He stood and walked to the leaded glass windows that looked through the diamond pattern and out into the drive. 4 cars were parked, and a fifth had just been let in via the gate. The gatekeeper had been told to leave as soon as the last car arrived, and Farnborough could see the retreating form of the uniformed man as he walked forlornly away on the other side of the tall iron gate. Farnborough scoffed. No doubt that man would be returning home to his fat wife, waiting to die with her in the stuffy old cottage that they rented at the edge of the village. The bodies of the girls that he and the Woods had enjoyed last night were already in the incinerator. Woods had done them a favour. A few hours of terror were far better than the slow realisation that they were going to die, Farnborough reflected with a sigh. For a brief moment he'd considered that they were someone's daughters and granddaughters, but he'd pushed those thoughts aside, safe in the knowledge that they would be dead soon too. The driver stepped out of the car and walked to the entrance. The door opened in front of him, and another figure ushered the new entrant inside. "It's time," said Farnborough quietly. He stepped away from the window and towards the door that led into the hall, followed by Woods. There, the man that arrived and the man that had let him in were standing together. Across the hall, the door to another room opened, and 2 further men stepped out. All 5 of Farnborough's agents were finally together. Of the men, Lord Farnborough was the only one that looked distinct. All 6 were genetically the same man, but Farnborough was at least 4 decades older than the rest. The other 5 looked identical. Farnborough had started off with more Veroandi, but had lost a few over the years. He walked over to the man who had just joined them and shook his hand. "You missed the celebrations last night," he said candidly, and with a sly wink. The man grinned. "I'm sure there'll be more opportunities," he said, removing his scarf. "Maybe, though none with the same lack of consequence." Farnborough turned to address all of the men. "Unfortunately, it appears that our lovely Madam Ambassador has managed to convince the Ragnarok faction to follow the Idrisil plan. Therefore, we still have much to do. Once we've woken from our hibernation, myself and Woods Prime here," he gestured to the man standing by the study door, "will need to subtly undermine everything that the survivors are doing. We've already put some problems their way. The lateness of the decision to allow survivors means that the designated Opus will be hibernating close to where they reside, since there was no opportunity to relocate them to the Alpha site. This means they will have to be transported to the Cairngorms, which will be a logistical challenge and slow them down a lot. We will be released a few months earlier than they are. We have oxygen supplies to account for the fact that levels in the atmosphere will still be low. By then we would have been given the locations of all of the trees that the Opus have hibernated in. It is our job to ensure that key figures from that group do not live to join the rest." Farnborough smirked. "It will not be easy. Once we've eliminated those key figures by destroying their hibernation trees, myself and Woods Prime will re-hibernate at the Alpha site after destroying the trees occupied by Oakley, Carruthers, Ursula, Marianne Mackenzie and the Ambassador. We will not be the very first to be freed, but we will be amongst them." The man who had just arrived nodded. I had hoped that we were done," he said. Farnborough took a deep draw from his cigar, spilling more ash on his jacket as he did so. "That was my hope too, my boy," he said. "It seems that the road to good intentions is paved with hell." He looked at all of the men fondly, then gestured to them. "Follow." The grounds of Lord Farnborough's estate contained several large patches of woodland. The other 4 Woods had piled into an open-backed ancient green Land Rover. Woods Prime drove and Lord Farnborough sat with him in the front. "What of the Prime Minister?" Woods Prime asked. "Carl Tucker is safely in a government bunker with his current woman and some of his kids. They have food, water and oxygen for several months, which he believes will be adequate. It won't. They will be dead years before the trees restore oxygen." Farnborough smiled. "I almost wish I could be a fly on the wall when he works it out. When he works it out, I'm going to put works that out and italicise that. And so I've sort of... Bear with me. Hiya, hello mate, you alright? Yeah, good, thanks. Good. Couple of bits for you today, my rose. Right, I'll put that down. Excellent, thank you very much. I'm not sure what all of these are. So, I know what one of them is. and some of them are probably going to be Lego pieces. So let's have a look. Oh, that's another Lego set that I ordered. Now this is the cool one. Let me just sit down. This is the one that I mentioned earlier, which I'm going to be quite keen to listen to. Fragile. As fragile as my ego. Come on. There we go. So this is it, the first Jodie Whittaker audio adventure. I am really looking forward to listening to this. I'm going to put it in my CD player as soon as I have finished this live stream. So yeah, starring Jodie Whittaker and Mandip Gill as the Doctor and Yaz. Yeah, really looking forward to this. Excellent stuff. Right, but I can't do this. So what the hell is this then? This has to be, well, maybe the thing I've ordered is coming in two bits, because I can't imagine that's all of it. It's an answer to my hot room. Yes, I'm looking forward to it. If you like, I can't remember if I'm sure I must have mentioned Doctor Who with you on here, because I talk about Doctor Who quite a lot. But I'm thinking this is half of one thing. Oh no, it's everything. Is it? So this is a way of keeping cool in bed on a hot day, and it's stupidly expensive. Is that the machine? It can't be the machine as well, surely. No, it's just... yeah, it's half of it. So there must be something else coming. Maybe that's being delivered separately. So it's basically a bed, a sheet, but you can plug it in, and actually it cools. There's a machine that cools the sheet down. So if you're in a bed in a hot room, which I am in, obviously I don't have. We've never. It's starting to get hotter in this country, and what we don't have is we don't have air conditioning, because you never really needed it here before. So this will keep me cool in my bed. I basically moved to a room at the back of the house, which is the one room that gets hot because the sun sets at the back of the house. But it's got there's loads of reasons why I want to move in there, so I'll stop waffling on about that. And this Lego set, it's such a little one. I might quickly build this. I'm such a sad man. I do apologise. I'm just going to work out which one this is that I've ordered. So it's not spare parts. So there's spare parts missing. There's parts missing from this one, which I've ordered separately, and I was hoping it was those, but no, it's a separate set that I've ordered. So let me quickly go into eBay. My eBay purchases, and it's that one. So it is set number 6849. So hang on. No, that's not it. I want the actual instructions. Right, so okay. Now there we go. so let's quickly build this. Sorry. Oh, didn't mean to do that. Lots of ads on here. Oh, there we go. So, should just be a case of, this isn't going to take very long, it's a very small set, so forgive me. This is where I find out there are bits missing, which is one of my pet hates when buying Lego on eBay, especially if they haven't, well, to be fair, I don't buy them if they're not complete, and there are some sellers that kind of sell them as complete when they're not, which is quite annoying. Where's the, oh, there we go. Right, so then I want, put that in the wrong place, you idiot. So that goes there, that goes there, and one of those. That's quite dirty, so I'll put the cleaner one there. Sorry. No. Yeah, this is a bit grubby, but I can clean it up. That's not a problem. I'd rather have a whole complete, I'd rather have a dirty complete set than a clean incomplete one. And so far, it seems to have every part. I've not found any missing ones yet. Oh, I'm such a bloody child. Oh. And then it wants a computer screen there, and one there, and that little piece there. Okay. And then it wants, this is nearly done already. Apologies, I cannot resist Lego. And a tiny little break from what I'm doing is not necessarily a bad thing. So that goes in there. Oops. And that goes in there. There we go. And those two little bits go there. And go. Oh. Right, so, oh, it's already done that for me, kind of. So that looks like that. And step 3 is to put, apparently, those on there. Weird. Okay, that on there. That on there. Ah, I see. So that goes there. That goes, ah, right. So that goes on there. That there. Then, okay, that on the top there like that. And then, there you go, literally putting the last pieces on now, so I'm almost done. Apologies for the Lego interlude. Somebody's, you've just said something and I can't see what it is. Hang on, let me go to my app. I probably said something ages ago. Oh, I can't really. Buying Lego to find there's missing pieces is annoying. Yeah, I mean, it's more of a risk with second-hand Lego as well, because the sets I'm buying are classics. Classic ones that are no longer available to buy new, so I don't have much choice. But no, every single piece is here, so they will get a 100% score from me, and there is the finished toy. There we go, nice little, oh, that's a bit wonky, hang on, let me just even that up. Nice little set from 19, and those move as well. I think this is 1986 or 1987. But yeah, I love this stuff. Oh dear, right. So the spare parts for this one, not here yet, never mind. Right, let me do what I'm here to do and do some writing, for goodness sake. Keeping you in suspense like this, it's not fair. Right, let me... The ground of Lord Farnborough's estate contained several large patches of woodland. The 4 other woods had piled into an open-backed ancient green Land Rover. Woods Prime drove, and Lord Farnborough sat with him at the front. What of the Prime Minister? Woods Prime asked. Carl Tucker is safe in a government bunker with his current woman and some of his kids. They have water, food and oxygen for several months, which he believes will be adequate. It won't. They'll be dead 5 years before the trees restore oxygen. Farmer smiled. I almost wish I could be a fly on the wall when he works that out. One of the men in the back leapt out every time they came to a gate. And I think that should be leapt, and I think it will correct me. Leapt out every time they came to a gate. The first time that he'd gone to close it behind. The first time, comma. He had attempted to close it behind them. Now, the first he'd attempted to close it behind them, but Farnborough yelled, "What's the bloody point, old chap?" at him. And so at subsequent access points, the man had climbed. That just needs rewording. Was open. One of the men in the back leapt out when they came to a gate. That's better. He had also attempted to close it behind them. But Farnborough yelled, "What's the bloody point, old chap?" And so at subsequent access points, the man returned to the vehicle as soon as it was open, as soon as he had opened it. Is that all right? Let me read that again. One of the men in the back leapt out when they came to a gate. He had also attempted to close it. He'd also attempted to close it behind them, but finally, "What's the bloody point, old chap?" at him. And so at subsequent access points, the man... as soon as he'd opened it. The route took them via some badly maintained tarmac pathways and old dirt tracks. Eventually they came to a waist-high brick wall that surrounded a large grove of trees, many among them old and even ancient oaks. Everyone piled out of the vehicle. Woods 3 opened the gate one final time. This one was only wide enough to allow pedestrians through. Nobody berated him when he closed it behind them. The men walked along a dirt path that ran between the trees for a few minutes until they reached a clearing. The area had 9 great oaks surrounding the perimeter. It was as though they'd been grown for this very purpose. Maybe they had been. "Gentlemen," said Farnborough. He bowed somewhat sarcastically at them. "I thank you for your service, and for services yet to come." Woods Prime entered from the other side of the clearing with 6 clothes hangers. He handed one out to each man, and they all undressed, hanging their clothes on the hangers and putting smaller items such as socks, shoes and underwear into a bag that was looped onto the hanger for that purpose. The 6 naked men, trim and fit apart from the overweight and pudgy Lord Farnborough, walked to where Woods Prime had come from. There was a small shed there with a clothing rail along the inside wall and 9 oxygen bottles in a rack on the floor. The men all hung their clothes up and returned to the clearing. Each man stood by a tree. They all waited for Farnborough to raise his hand, and when he did so, they did likewise. Farnborough's hand touched the tree, and the bark seemed to melt and rise beneath it. He smiled and looked around him. The same was happening with his cohorts. He returned his gaze to the bark, waiting for the sensation that told him that he was about to be drawn inside. He waited for a few seconds more, and then frowned. Nothing seemed to be happening. He looked at the Woods and could tell from the concern on their faces that nothing was happening to them either. He tried to pull his hand away, but it was stuck. Woods Prime was the first to notice that 3 Scald had emerged from the unused oak trees on the perimeter of the clearing. "My lord!" he shouted in warning. Farmer looked up to see the Scald walk over to the first 3 Woods. All of them were desperately trying to wrench their hands away from the tree, but to no avail. The Scald, all wearing the form of Idrisil's ambassador, approached the terrified men and snapped their necks. "Shit!" said Woods Prime. The 3 Scald walked quickly over to the 3 remaining men. 2 of them... No, I'm going to say slowly. There we go. Also, The three Skuld walked slowly over to the remaining men. Two of them killed the remaining woods and then formed a semicircle around Farnborough. One of them grabbed his free arm, and the eyes, wooden as they were, appeared to be boring into his soul. He could feel the things sifting through his memories, and to his horror they lingered on the girls that he had violated the night before. He could feel that memory being slowly digested. He closed his eyes. He did not see the Skuld let go of his arm, although he felt it. He did not see each Skuld tearing their right arms away from their bodies to the elbow to reveal a sharp wooden spear. He felt the grip on his shoulders as he was bent over and waited for what was going to happen. Then he felt excruciating pain as something violated his lower body. It was the first of three Skuld to penetrate him, but once the first was inside, he was in so much pain that he barely noticed the others as they stabbed viciously into his flesh. I thought I'd give him an unpleasant ending. Walker stood behind a tree. He was taking as much oxygen as he could into his lungs, breathing in, holding his breath for a few seconds, then exhaling slowly and quietly. One or two of the enemy were dead. Reconnaissance over the last 20 hours told him there were 5 targets. They had incapacitated the 2 that had military training, including the traitor Vickers, but it had been at a heavy cost. His comrades were dead. Walker was the only one left alive, and he still had 3 people to kill. And he still had 3 people left to kill. I'm just going to lose the left to kill. He knew that he did not have long. Vickers and Sharvar had been wearing portable oxygen, something he had no access to unless he was able to steal it from them. That left the old man, the very old man, and the ambassador. He knew that somehow these people could take refuge physically inside the trees, and it was possible that the large one surrounding him contained some of these refugees. He did not have enough fuel left in his flamethrower to burn them all. His main objective was the ambassador. Any others were a bonus. Walker considered his next move. He knew that they would call more Skuld to look for him, but he had become adept at avoiding them. If one came past, he stood still, very still. A slight movement would be enough for them to identify him, but he'd survived several encounters by holding his breath and lying motionless on the ground. He knew that these things would not kill him. They would hold him in place until someone else did. He had seen the 52 bodies in the clearing, and it had made him angry. He knew that he would carry that anger with him. He knew that he would carry that anger with him until he died, which would be soon. All he had to do was get close enough. The middle-aged man was the only other person in the group who was trained to use a gun, and earlier observations suggested that he was unwell. Walker smiled. All he had to do was choose his killing ground and wait. He could hear the group in the distance approaching him. They did not seem to understand the concept of stealth. He did not know if they were specifically pursuing him or coming this way for another reason. He was about to move on when he heard footsteps coming towards him from the other direction. It had to be the wooden warriors. Their feet made a recognisable sound as they approached, a sort of flat thud that sounded nothing like human feet. He looked in the direction they were coming from. He could tell there was more than one, but he was not sure how many more. He was not sure how many. Walker stepped carefully into a gap between 2 trunks. He was not going to lie down this time. He carefully placed his gun on the ground, flat, not propped up in case it fell over, and waited. The things were in the adjacent clearing now. He closed his eyes, took another deep breath, then held it. He heard at least 3 pairs of wooden feet stomp past him. They were incredibly close this time, perhaps less than a metre away. He kept still and waited until they had walked past, gone past. He held his breath for a few more seconds before opening his eyes. He listened carefully. He could hear the ambassador speaking. The group was much closer than he had realised. "He's dying," the ambassador was saying. "Skuld, direct us to Adrian Vickers' hibernation tree." Walker smiled. So they were looking for a particular tree, but had become disoriented or lost. There was silence, and then the footsteps seemed to get a bit closer. He could hear the group moving towards him for a few seconds, but as they continued, he realised they were now walking parallel to the path he had intended to take. He carefully leaned down and retrieved his machine gun, and started moving as stealthily as he could towards the footsteps. He had limited ammunition now, so using the gun to destroy the Skuld was not an option. Single shots were all that he could afford. He heard the steps halt. "This one," came the voice of the ambassador. "Watch out for the soldier. There is still one left. Release as many Skuld as you can and form a perimeter." Hearing that, he knew that he was almost out of time. He did not know how long before there were Skuld, many more Skuld in the vicinity. Walker took another deep breath and took some tentative steps towards the voices. "Good luck, Adrian," he heard. I'll see you on the other side. The voice was coming from just beyond the cluster of trees he could see before him. He took 3 more careful steps and looked out from behind 2 of the trees. He had clear shots of the ambassador and the middle-aged man. The old bloke was obscured by a scald, and the lad that was slowly being absorbed by the tree was as good as dead already, so there was no point wasting a bullet on him. Shakily, he raised his gun at the ambassador and fired. He watched her scream, double over, and fall to the ground. He had time to aim again, and fired at the middle-aged man, watching him fall too. The scald were already heading for him, but as he did, they moved out of the way, and his view of the old man became clear. I'm going to change that. As they did, they moved out of the way. His view of the old man became clear. Feeling dizzy, Walker fired but missed. A moment later, Skull grabbed hold of him. The old man was walking towards him. Yeah, I don't need to call him walking towards him. Gun in hand. Their eyes met. "Do your worst, you old bastard," screamed Walker. "Oh, I will, you fucking little prick," wheezed Carruthers before emptying 3 bullets into his face. The common room in the Mendell Halls of Residence at Mansfield University was not recognisable as the space Ronnie had inhabited towards the end of the previous year. Many of the students had managed to travel home to die with their friends and loved ones, but some had not wanted to leave. Erica Yates was one of them. She'd never been especially close to her family. She saw the friendship group that she'd nurtured here at the university as much more of a family unit than a real one. It was Erica and a like-minded classmate who had transformed the common room. The sofas had been pushed to the side, and these were draped with any linen that she'd been able to get her hands on, mostly torn from empty beds in dormitories. These were now full of couples and trios, and one person sitting alone. Any official notice boards on the walls had either been torn down and dumped ceremoniously in a nearby corridor, or covered with more linen that was pinned, and in one case nailed to the walls. Any provocative images that she'd been able to locate anywhere in the building, pictures of semi or fully naked men and women, were placed around them. The drawer in the caretaker's office had been an unexpectedly lucrative source in this regard. The curtains were closed and lamps had been placed around the room, covered where possible with red material. Some of this came from the dismembered curtains that were so thick they completely obscured the light from the lamp, rather than creating the desired crimson glow. The tables that had been pushed to the side were adorned with candles, many of which were lit. Next to them were bottles of spirits and dozens of empty glasses. Someone had attached a latch top to the common room television, upon which a playlist of hardcore hedonistic group pornography was exhibited. The exaggerated shrieks and moans from the video bounced around the common room. In the middle of the floor, 6 single mattresses had been dragged from vacated rooms and covered with fitted sheets and any cushions and pillows that Erica had been able to find in the abandoned rooms. There were duvets as well, and at least 7 naked forms were on or between them. 2 were lying on the mattress with their eyes closed, and another 5 were indulging in group sex. Erica waited until the boy that was with her had finished, then smiled and crawled out of the bed. There was a white dressing gown on the floor, but she ignored it and stood, feeling gloriously free in her nakedness. "Where are you going?" said one of the boys Where are you going? One of the boys that she'd just been with asked her. She glanced down and smiled as another girl started paying attention to him, and his eyes closed. "I'm going to go and try and get Laura here. I'm going to try and get Laura to come here." This is totally in character with. She's not a big character, but this bit is totally in character with what this young lady is like. "We're all dying. I'll have a hedonistic sex party. It'll be fine. I'm going to try and get Laura," he said. One of the other men in the bed, Ben, glanced up from what he was doing. He smiled. "You don't need to disturb her." Erica shook her head. "She's the only person here that's by herself," she said. "I don't want her to die alone." Ben rolled his eyes. Perhaps it was something to do with what Erica just said, and perhaps it was not. But she pulled her dressing gown down. "What? No. But she pulled a dressing gown on and ventured from the common room and into the corridor, closing the door behind her. This muted the sounds from the video beds and sofas, but not completely. Erica walked as quickly as she could without getting out of breath. It was getting harder to breathe, and Erica suspected that few of them would last the night. She turned another corner and came to the room she was looking for. Not bothering to knock, she opened the door. Laura was sitting with her eyes closed in the armchair next to her bed. In her hands was a picture of her with Danny taken a few days before he vanished. Erica carefully took the photograph from her and placed it on the desk. Laura opened her eyes. "Come and join us," said Erica gently. "I hate the idea of you being here by yourself. You don't have to join in. Just have a glass and chill." She leaned in closer, and a sultry grin crossed her face. "Calvin's there. You used to like Calvin." Laura shook her head. "As you said, I used to." Erica knelt, doing her best to tighten her dressing gown as she did so. "Look, I understand you're grieving for Danny. He was a bloody sweetheart, and I desperately regret what I did to him." Laura smiled and glanced at the picture on her desk. "He'd forgiven you." Erica looked sad. "I know. He's a much better person than I will ever be." She subconsciously looked at where her watch would have been had she been wearing one. "Please, Laura, you don't have to join in. Have a drink. Rest. Just please don't die on your own." Tears were trickling down her face. "I can't," said Laura between sobs. "He wouldn't forgive me." Erica shook her head. "Under the circumstances, I think he would." She pulled Laura's arm until she was standing, but Laura shook her head, walked over to a bed, and flopped down onto it. Erica stared at her, torn between returning to the party and looking after her friend. Swearing softly to herself, she crossed over to the bed and lay down next to Laura, kissing her forehead as she did so. "You should go back," said Laura after a few minutes. "No," said Erica, "I'm not leaving you by yourself." Laura nodded and looked at Erica with curiosity. "Did you... How was Ben?" Erica giggled, raised her eyebrows and hugged Laura. "Ben was next." Laura looked across at her and frowned. "You missed out on Ben? For me?" Erica smiled and ran her fingers along the side of Laura's face. "You're not dying alone, Laura." "I feel bad." Erica shook her head. "Don't," she said with a pained expression on her face. "You can have too much of a good thing. I don't know how Annabelle Chong managed over 200. I'm done in after not many more than 10. "Who's Annabelle Chong?" "It doesn't matter, sweetie. I'm not going anywhere." Laura smiled. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You're welcome," said Erica. After a pause, she added, "And I'm sure Ben isn't as good as everyone said, even if he is definitely as big." Laura was about to smile when there was a crashing sound and the door flew open, slamming onto the wall. Standing on the opening, framed in the dimming light, was like a wooden statue. Laura's eyes opened wide, and Erica screamed, "What the fuck is that?" Erica leapt out of the bed as the wooden mannequin walked over towards it. With unbelieving eyes, Erica realised that it closely resembled their lost friend. Her mouth opened wide, she muttered the name. "Ronnie." The creature strode past her, knocking her out of the way and over to the bed. It scooped up the screaming Laura in its arms. She was too exhausted to resist. The creature stomped back out of the room, taking Laura with it, leaving hysterical Erica screaming in a heap on the floor. Erica eventually recovered her composure. She did not know what to do now. The idea of Ben had lost its appeal, but she had no intention of dying by herself. Carefully, because she could feel that the air was thinner even since she had left the common room, she made her way back. Most of the exertion in the room was over now. There was simply not enough oxygen left to sustain the previous levels of activity. I'm just going to... I don't need to. I'm just not enough oxygen left. I don't need to do the sustain the previous levels of activity thing. Some of the couples and trios on the sofas were still, perhaps a little too still. Eric looked toward the mattress and could see that Ben was sitting alone, slightly away from the others, smoking a cigarette. He saw her and beckoned her over to him. He lifted his corner of the duvet and gestured for her to join him. Shakily, Erica dropped the dressing gown back to the floor and lowered herself slowly down next to him. "No, Laura?" she asked. Erica shook her head. "She's dead," she said sadly. Was that what had just happened? Had her oxygen-starved brain shown her something less traumatic than what had happened in reality? "I'm sorry to hear that," said Ben cautiously. "It was peaceful, I think," Erica lied before moving her face towards his. She started kissing him deeply on the lips. And I don't need that last little... The dressing gown remained crumpled on the floor. It was never touched again. Carruthers crawled painfully. Scold! He called hoarsely. The creature was standing over Ronnie and waiting for instructions that would never come. The creature was standing over Ronnie and waiting for instructions that would never come, and ignored him completely. Ronnie had a bullet in one of her lungs. It was a miracle that missed her heart and that she was alive. She was probably drowning her own blood, Crothers swore. She wasn't strictly needed in the new world, but she definitely deserved to be there, and it would be a better society with her in it. Crothers staggered over to Oakley, whose eyes flickered open, and he sat up painfully. He had a second bullet in the same shoulder as the first. He looked at Crothers, who'd managed... who had lowered himself into a sitting position by the adjacent tree. These skulls won't obey us, Crothers caught. Right, these skulls won't obey us, Crothers coughed. Ronnie's not dead, but we don't have long to get her to safety before she is. The soldier, asked Oakley painfully. Dealt with, said Crothers smugly, opening his eyes and gesturing to the red gunk on his trousers. I appear to be wearing his brains. That's better. Dealt with, said Crothers smugly, opening his eyes and gesturing to the red gunk on his trousers. I appear to be wearing his brains. He coughed again. I'm out of oxygen, he said, removing the mask and bottle and placing them on the floor next to him. Oakley stood up. It was difficult, but he managed. I have to get her to safety, he wheezed, somehow finding the strength to grab her body and throw it over his shoulder, even though the pain as he did so was excruciating. Then I'll come back for you. No, you won't, snapped Crothers. Get her to safety, then look after yourself. But you'll die. Crothers grinned through his pain. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I can crawl. I think the wrong word is italicised. I can crawl. Nope. I can crawl. Skuld, help me get Ronnie to safety, then come back and help Crothers. Oakley staggered forwards, expecting the Skuld to follow. As far as it's concerned, she's dead, said Crothers. We won't get any more assistance that way. Oakley nodded, started to walk forwards, then turned back to Crothers. Good luck, he said simply. I'm sorry about the way Arbor Associates treated you, the way I treated you. You're a far better man than I ever imagined. The last words he heard Crothers say were a scornful, oh, fuck off, as he left the clearing. Had he not been in so much pain, he would have laughed. Ronnie's tree was half a mile away, about his own a third of a mile beyond that. Making sure he was balanced properly, Oakley walked carefully in the right direction. Ronnie's dead weight on his shoulder was bad enough, but the pain from the bullet wounds was far worse. He could feel his balance was off, which is why he concentrated on placing one foot in front of the other. The ground was uneven beneath his feet, which would not usually be a problem for him, but his weakened state it could be lethal. He could feel the energy dissipating from his body in droves. If he tripped and dropped her, he was not sure he'd be able to pick her up again. One foot in front of the other, left, then right, left, then right. He glanced up a few minutes later to make sure that he was where he thought he should be, and he was. He had done remarkably well considering how much pain he was in, and he was almost there now. Perhaps 150 metres. He looked ahead and did not notice a protruding root on the ground. His foot caught it and he fell forwards, twisting his ankle and dropping Ronnie. He hit the ground with a thud and felt his head spinning. After a few moments he pushed himself to his feet and grabbed Ronnie's arms. It was as he feared. He no longer had the strength to lift her. He swore under his breath and leaned against a nearby tree to regain his composure. A few moments later he tried again. He pulled Ronnie's arms in an attempt to get her upright, but there was not enough strength left in him. Swearing, he dropped his arms for a few moments, increased the flow rate again from his oxygen bottle, and took several more deep, slow breaths, holding each one for a few seconds. He couldn't lift her, but he knew he was near to a tree. Maybe he could drag her. It reduced her chances of survival, but it was her only chance. He leaned down painfully, grabbed her wrists, and started to pull. The pain in his shoulder was unbearable. He managed to lug her 20 metres before he had to stop, but as soon as the pain died down a little, he tightened his grip and dragged her again. The pain returned more quickly this time. He was aware that each time he heaved a motionless body across the forest floor, he was managing a shorter distance. He looked around him and realised that their destination was just beyond the trees in front of him. Summoning his last reserves of strength and yelling in pain as he did so, Oakley dragged Ronnie the final 30 metres until she was next to the tree he had been aiming for. He fell to his knees, not sure how the next bit would work. He leaned over and kissed her cheek. "I never told her how bloody magnificent you really are," he spluttered. The cheek was still warm to the touch, and he could see a tiny bit of movement in her chest as she drew breath. "I was hoping I might be able to say it to your face one day. You are amazing. There will be a human race beyond today because of you." He hugged her, weeping as he did so, then lowered himself down to the ground with his back to the tree. He heaved her torso onto his knees. He had hoped to pull her into a sitting position, but did not have the power left in his muscles to do so. Instead, he pulled her hands across until they were touching the tree. To his immense relief, the bark raised around her limp hands and started to draw them in. He'd never seen anyone absorbed like this from a sitting position, but he had the distinct impression that the tree was pulling her upwards as well as forwards. Her arms were deep into the tree and higher up than where he had initially placed her hands. He steadied her body as much as he could. He knew that he would not be able to. He knew that he would not be able to draw a breath. He knew that she would not be able to draw a breath as her torso was absorbed. But that was about comfort, a way of convincing the conscious mind that you were not about to suffocate. So it did not matter. Slowly the tree dragged Ronnie inside itself. He kept his hands on her legs as they were drawn in and watched as her calves were absorbed and then her feet. A few moments later, there was no sign that she'd ever been there. Oakley exhaled in relief. Ideally, he should go back for Carruthers now, but the man had been right. He had told Oakley to look after himself, and Oakley knew that he did not have the strength to get back to Carruthers and help him too. Oakley's tree was not all that far from here. That needed to be his focus. He pulled himself upwards using the trunk of the great oak and started moving in the direction of his own sanctuary. For the first few steps it was much easier than it had been whilst carrying Ronnie, and he could afford to take his time now. There was nobody in the forest trying to kill him, and his wounds, whilst painful, would not finish him off before he got to his tree. He allowed himself a smile of relief and continued. It was difficult. He could feel that he was having to work very hard just to move. He leaned down to the controls of his oxygen bottle, then froze in horror. It was empty. A wave of nausea and dizziness crossed him, and he tried to think logically. Walker had survived without additional oxygen, he reasoned to himself, and he'd only just died. He needed to stay calm and move slowly. He had this. Oakley walked another 50 metres before a coughing fit overtook him. He fell to the floor, gasping for air, but his overworked lungs could not find enough precious oxygen. He let himself stay on the ground until the coughing had subsided. He raised his head and crawled painfully over to the nearby tree. He used it to steady himself and then looked around him. He was not where he thought he should be. In fact, he did not know exactly where he was. Panicking now, he turned back the way he had come. He reasoned that if he crawled back to Ronnie's tree, he would be able to work out where it had gone wrong and put it right. Realising that he was still carrying the weight of the useless oxygen bottle, he unslung it from himself and threw it to the ground. He crawled until he was back at the foot of Ronnie's tree. He tried to take slow breaths to calm himself, but that did not seem to be working now. He sat upright with his back to the tree and tried to regain his strength. His breath, it was not working. He felt dizzy and sick, and he could feel the mother of all headaches coming on. He tried to stand, but was suddenly unsure which way was up. He looked around him, but his sight was obscured by little flecks of white that were making it impossible to concentrate on anything. He felt his heart beating rapidly inside his chest, and it was getting faster. It was then that he knew. He was not going to make it to the safety of his tree. This is going to upset me, this bit, sorry. He could feel his head swimming. He exhaled and accepted his fate. Ronnie had survived, the beautiful, arrogant, courageous girl. He closed his eyes as he remembered. His subconscious started replaying memories of the journey that had brought him here, memories of Mackenzie and Ronnie and how brave and resourceful they'd been, of Ursula and her quiet dignity, of Carruthers and how Arbor associates had let him down and tried to blame him for their failings, of brave Marianne and their intrepid fighting spirit, of Oliver Shaw, of their time together, of the traitor Lord Farnborough. The next images that he recognised were from a much earlier point in his life. They were of an explosion on a ship and his desperate attempts to escape the sinking vessel, of how he led a small group to safety, only for them all to be arrested. Eventually, Oakley's breathing stopped. A small gust of wind blew through the forest. The designated survivors were on their journey now, but Gordon Oakley's had ended. Blow nose and compose yourself. Yeah, that always gets me, that bit. Because again, that's a character that's been with me for about 6 years, and I agonised over that. I actually, at one point, thought maybe I'm not going to kill him off. But it kind of, I don't know, it just felt fitting. However, I felt so bad killing him off that another character, and this is literally yesterday I made this decision, another character has survived. So the Arbor Associates Trooper Shavar, who was earlier in this chapter, in the original draft of this chapter, which existed up until yesterday, he's badly injured in the explosion, and Ronnie keeps her promise and kills him, so that he doesn't have to die in pain or die of oxygen starvation by himself when all the others are safely in their trees. And I just thought that was awful. And the guy has literally given his life knowing that he's not going to survive, but these other people will. So instead of having Ronnie shooting him dead, and you knowing, if you look at it, if you look at the way it's worded, Adrian reports back he didn't make it. Almost to that effect, he's dead. He didn't survive the explosion. He did, and well, we'll see what happens in the next chapter. But yeah, right. So yes, that did make me a little emotional, I'm afraid. But like I say, that character, his death was one I decided on a long time ago. But I really like him as a character. I really do. He's a sort of gruff old git, but you know, his heart is so in the right place. I've done something weird there. Why has that not appeared? Has it done it again? Has it saved the file in the wrong place? Export to Word. No, it's put it in the wrong... on the desktop. Why has it suddenly started doing that? Let me just go and erase the file that's appeared that I don't need. Yeah, there. Say this chapter was originally called The Wings of Angels, but I thought that was too sentimental, so it's now called Dance Macabre, which works, I think. Right, so now I need to grammarlyise that. So let's do that. Luckily, I don't really have to read this again, so how many suggestions has it got? So let's have a look. Looks like it's mainly going to be commas. Yep. It's set in 2019, so it's the Queen. He would not need them again. Yeah, that's fair. Flames seem to take longer than to get going than usual, and even when they were roaring, they did not. Yeah, that's fine. I'll add the they. Crept quietly. You wouldn't creep noisily, would you? So I'll go with that. That's is that a syllogism? Is that what you call it? Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah, that's fine. Both he and yeah, that's fair enough. However, the knees looking and nothing can see made it. Yeah, that's fine. Are you going to be doing? No, I don't think so. I'm going to say collapsed rather than fell over, actually. So this is the bit where Sharvar dies. A bomb. Config Sharvar is dead. He followed me out, but he was horrendously injured. He collapsed through there, and I was unable to revive him. He closed his eyes. I've been shot. He fell to his knees, wincing in agony as Ronnie rushed over to him. Yeah, so we don't know. Collapsed, not collapsed. Collapsed. That should be who had, yep. No, I'm not going to. Me. By then, comma. What does it think it's suggesting? That drivel. And they. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. And the large ones surrounding might. No, I'm leaving that as is. Sorry, this is very boring, me just correcting this. But punctuation of this is... Sorry, the punctuation the AI is giving me is better than my punctuation. No, that's fair enough. Dressing gown, I think. Called leapt, yeah. That's fine. Oh, no. I was going to be... There we go. So that's that. What score was 96? I'll have that. So let's have the edited file. Let's shove it up here. Let's minimize that. Let's open the file. Let's copy it. Weirdly, I have to paste it into here first. Otherwise it does weird stuff. There we go, and copied it again. And now to paste it into the final document, format it appropriately, and done. And that is chapter 40 signed off. Wow, so let me lose those files, so I don't need them. And let me drag that into the edited chapters folder. There we go. So now I only have 3 chapters left to do, left to sign off. This isn't totally finished when I've done this, I hasten to add. So what I will be doing after I've edited these last 3 chapters, which I'm hoping to do by the end of the weekend. So it's Friday today. I might even do some more today. We shall see. But my aim is to get this done by the end of Sunday. It gives me one chapter a day. Well, I have to sign off two one day. Anyway, I can do it by the end of Sunday, which is great because that means effectively the second draft is almost signed off. So what I will do before I call it signed off is I will format it to look like a book. I will use KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, to send me a physical copy of it as a book, which I will read because weirdly I pick up a little bit more off that. It will be minor changes, it will be tiny stuff as I read through it, and then once that's done I will consider it signed off and it will go out to beta readers. If there's anybody watching that would like to be a beta reader on this, please let me know. I do have something my friend TG Campbell, who's on here as Bow Street Society, has suggested to me. I probably shouldn't send it out as a PDF to people I've not met. So if anybody would like it, I'm afraid I need to send it to you as a physical copy. People I know can have a PDF. So for example, Tani is partially sighted and actually will find it easier to read in that format. So if anybody would like to be a beta reader on this thing, please let me know. You can direct message me. You can via here. If you click on the QR code in the corner of the screen, there's loads of other ways you can get hold of me. So through my social media, through Discord. I think there's probably an email address on there. I haven't looked at that in ages. What is actually on my link tree now? Let's find out. I don't know, am I close enough? Hang on. I don't know if that's... Oh, I am. Ha, there we go. So what's on my link tree? Let's have a look. It's just loading very, very slowly. So my podcasts, website subtitle. No, it hasn't got my email address, but it's got all my social media, which you can message me through, including Discord, Threads, Facebook, YouTube, X, Blue Sky, TikTok, though I don't use it very much, Reddit, Instagram, Twitch, Substack. There's an email address on my website as well. You can even comment on the podcasts. So there we go. And I think that's me done. If not for today, that's me done for now. So I've got 40 chapters signed off and a prologue. So that's effectively 41 book units out of 44. I've got the last 3 to go through. I've already started looking through chapter 41 today because when I made the decision not to kill Shavar, I have added the scene where Ronnie finds out that he's alive, which is nice. And yeah, so I'm done. Thank you very much So the people I've interacted with today are Angel Faye 87 and Bow Street Society. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here and comment on the stream. Other than that, yeah, anybody else who's watching but hasn't commented, thank you so much. That's me done. I'll be back later today or tomorrow, depending on whether I get much more of this read. Cheers, guys. Much appreciated. Bye-bye.